Hey everyone, Firescale Audiobooks here. If there's a novel you'd love to hear more of, you can support us on Patreon or Ko-fi. Depending on your tier, I'll make extra parts just for the stories you're most excited about. Usually I can only upload 4 to 5 parts of each novel, but with your support we can go beyond that. And of course, don't forget to hit subscribe. It helps more than you know.
Young man, what are you doing going to a place like the Dragon King Temple at this hour? It's probably closed by now, isn't it? Los Angeles, 8 p.m. on August 30th, a taxi travels on the highway. The taxi driver glanced curiously at the passenger beside him. It was a face so handsome that even the taxi driver, who had once been known as the Little White Wolf of Los Angeles, felt inferior and couldn't help but exclaim, "This young man is damn handsome." However, the main reason why the taxi driver couldn't help but take a second look was because the young man's expression was a bit off. He'd been in this line of work for so many years and had never seen such a strange person. The kid sat there not saying a word, his eyes fixed straight ahead. That look in his eyes seemed to be filled with nostalgia, or perhaps he was staring at something unseen in the darkness. This made him a little uneasy, so he naturally wanted to say something. Fortunately, at that moment, the young man turned to look at the taxi driver, thought for a moment, and said, "Come see the scenery. It's been so long since I've been to Los Angeles." The taxi driver looked at the young man. "Young man, aren't you from Los Angeles?" Clearly, if he had known it wasn't a local, he would have taken a longer, roundabout route. The young man said, "I'm from here, but I've been away for a long time." He gazed at the long street illuminated by streetlights in the pitch-black night and at the rushing Mother River in the distance, and he was reminiscing. In the previous life, during the terrifying era, the source of the destruction of Los Angeles was this very place. The blood-eyed Dragon Lord, a first-rank evil god from the Dragon King Temple of Los Angeles, who instilled fear in countless ghost tamers across the entire Blue Star. Memories of this place flashed through his mind. Unfortunately, the driver couldn't see through his reminiscences and interrupted. "Oh, you don't look very old. Did you go off to university? Haha, young people these days don't want to go home. They're all rushing to big cities." "If you ask me, Los Angeles is still the best." Hearing this, the young man nodded in sincere agreement. Indeed, it was excellent. The first of the great cities in the previous life to be wiped out, with a population of several million, had an unusually high number of inhabitants, ranking among the top in the world. Furthermore, it is guarded by one of the most powerful first-grade strange creatures, the ferocious god. There are really few cities that can compare to Los Angeles. By the way, how long have you been away from Los Angeles for college? Things have developed so fast in that time. The driver was a talkative man, and it was rare to meet a fellow traveler who had returned to his hometown, so he couldn't help but strike up a conversation. The young man thought for a moment. "It's been about 20 years. The taxi driver was utterly exasperated. "Damn it, 20 years. This young man looks to be only 22 or 23, probably just graduated from university. So he was only 3 years old when he left Los Angeles. After you get on the bus, you always look nostalgic. What are you nostalgic about?" The driver was speechless, and seeing the kid's serious expression, he was even more dumbfounded. Is this kid mentally unstable? However, the night was long, and there was still a distance to travel to the Dragon King Temple, so he asked, "Then why did you go back to Los Angeles?" "Your parents are here." The young man shook his head. "I'm an orphan. I'll settle down in Los Angeles from now on." The driver was taken aback, glancing at the handsome young man, but his expression softened subconsciously. Humans tend to conjure up strange and self-righteous sympathies in response to certain words. "So your life isn't easy either, is it?" A look of melancholy and reminiscence appeared in the young man's eyes. "It's more than just difficult, it's been a struggle." For 20 years, he lived in constant fear, walking on the edge of a precipice. He couldn't remember how many times he had brushed with death, how many people around him had betrayed him, died, and sacrificed themselves, ultimately leading him to that point. That step that will lead to his ascension to the throne. But at the very last moment before he was about to become the king of Chujiang, he was met with a betrayal from behind. That one blow wiped out 20 years of his hard work. King Dingxi of Bianchang. A cold glint flashed in the young man's eyes, but in the end he simply smiled and looked out at the boundless night. "That's all in the past, the future will be even more interesting. Hey, it's great to be young, always so energetic. Hee, just like my daughter." At this point, the taxi driver also revealed a happy smile. He has a loving wife and daughter, and while he's not extremely wealthy, he's well-fed and clothed. In this era, happiness isn't exactly a rare thing. Unfortunately, taxi drivers won't understand. What will happen 3 days later at 00:00 on September 3rd, Kyoto time? Countless strange occurrences occurred, and the Book of Life and Death appeared beside everyone, judging their lives and deaths. Humans either die under the influence of the supernatural or become demon slayers in the underworld order, struggling to survive. In this era, there are still 3 days left. Perhaps things have already changed, but ordinary taxi drivers haven't noticed it yet. The young man did not say anything more. The dim streetlights illuminated his disheveled black hair, and he seemed lost in thought again. Rebirth, returning to the past, how incredible is that? However, in such an era, even if he were to live again, he wouldn't have absolute confidence that he could go further or more steadily than in his previous life. So he decided to gamble. And in all of Los Angeles, there is no place more suitable for this gamble than the place we are about to go. To gamble with the mutilated body of a human to control this strange, perhaps newly born, first-class ferocious god-level being who could have ranked among the top in the Dragon Kingdom in his previous life. It's starting again. The taxi driver, looking at the young man who seemed lost in thought, muttered to himself, "Sure enough, this kid is definitely not mentally sound." So the taxi driver stepped on the gas and accelerated, and after leaving the main urban area, the speed suddenly increased. The Dragon King Temple in the distance seems to be finally about to appear. At this point, the young man was no longer in a hurry. Just drive slowly, it's late at night, safety first. This statement made the taxi driver pause for a moment. Wasn't it quite right? Could it be that I'm overthinking it? Could this kid just be drunk? But he doesn't smell of alcohol. The taxi driver was somewhat suspicious and unsure about the young man's mental state. Soon, the young man's voice rang out again. "It's getting late. After finishing this fare, you should go home and rest early. It's not safe at night." The taxi driver felt a warmth in his heart. Sure enough, I had been overthinking things. This is just a poor kid who's a bit sentimental because he was an orphan, and probably always wants to go back to his hometown. Thinking of this, the taxi driver, whether out of guilt or simply because he was naturally a talkative person, pondered for a moment and then began to speak again. "Young man, where are you from? Where have you lived all these years? Where did he come from?" A hint of reminiscence flashed in the young man's eyes. There, a sinister and malevolent god dwells, ready to devour humanity at any moment. There are those who have converted to the underworld and command eerie demons. There are many secret realms, ghostly realms, funerary objects, and curses. That place is the future human world. That place was hell back then. Finally, the young man opened his mouth. "Hell? What?" The driver was taken aback, thinking he had misheard. The young man didn't speak again, but simply smiled. "The reason is simple. The Dragon King Temple of Los Angeles, not far away, has finally arrived." The young man paid the fare, opened the car door, and looked towards the closed gates of the Dragon King Temple in the distance. The driver finally snapped out of his daze, rolled down the window, blinked, and looked at the young man's retreating figure. "Young man, what's your name?" The young man turned around and glanced at the driver. He didn't care about the driver's little scheme because he didn't care. However, he still smiled slightly. Beneath the warm smile lay a meaning that was difficult to understand. Chu Ching, Chu as in King Chujiang, Ching as in the clear sky and bright sun. In the darkness, the young man's figure slowly walked forward and disappeared. Only the taxi driver remained standing there, stunned for a moment before picking up his phone. "Hello, is this the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Office? I need to report a mental patient." "No, really." "A mental patient? Okay, all right, I understand." Dragon Kingdom, as the land of Kyushu with thousands of years of heritage, is the country with the deepest historical foundation on Blue Star. After the arrival of the Age of Terror, it is also the country with the most powerful ghost controllers and the most terrifying and bizarre phenomena. First-rank king-level ghost controllers, such as King Qin Guang, King Bian Cheng, King Zhuan Lun, King Wu Guan, etc. As for the truly terrifying and bizarre, there are quite a few as well. Among them, Los Angeles, 3 years after entering the Age of Horror, was completely transformed into a forbidden zone for humanity. That's right, in 3 years, the city of Los Angeles beneath our feet will become a dead zone. And one of the reasons that ultimately comes down to this is the mother river of the Dragon Kingdom, Yellow River. During these years of terror, a terrifying and bizarre figure was born here, whose level of terror could rival that of the top 5 or even the top 3 in the entire Dragon Kingdom. The sky was dark and gloomy. The Dragon King Temple before them resembled a menacing, monstrous structure, poised to devour anyone who approached. Chu Qing raised her head and looked at the Dragon King Temple. The monstrous demon king who destroyed Los Angeles and was feared throughout the Dragon Kingdom, and even the entire Blue Star, was none other than the Dragon King in this Dragon King Temple, Blood-Eyed Dragon Lord. The time has already reached 8:30. At this time, the Dragon King Temple no longer accepts incense offerings from tourists. Chu Qing circled around, and taking advantage of the darkness, and the fact that the Dragon King Temple was located in a secluded corner with dim streetlights, he leaped down from the wall in a few bounds and entered the dark Dragon King Temple. Compared to its bustling activity during the day, the place is extremely eerie at night. It was as if a pair of blood-red eyes were watching this intruder. After bypassing the incense shops and staff dormitories inside the temple, Chu Qing finally arrived at the main hall of the most famous Dragon King Temple in Luochang. Inside the main hall, the scent of incense and candles still lingered in the air. Who could have imagined that the Dragon King, whom countless humans worshipped with incense and prayed for good weather before the arrival of the terrifying era, would later become a ferocious god who ravaged the entire Dragon Kingdom? The culprit that makes people tremble at the mere mention of the river. Chu Qing subconsciously looked up. On that incense table, a statue with a human torso and a dragon's head stood there. However, the dragon's head on the statue is now covered with a layer of red cloth. According to local customs in Los Angeles, at the end of each month and the beginning of the next, a sacrifice is made to the Dragon King, and at this time, a red cloth is placed over the Dragon King's head. According to ancient legends, if young boys and girls or beautiful young women were sacrificed to the Dragon King, the Dragon King would marry the young women, and naturally, this red cloth symbolizing the wedding would be draped over them. Of course, in modern society, that's just a general expression of the idea. This red cloth will remain in place until after the 5th of next month before it is taken down. This also conveniently suited Chu Qing. He leaped directly onto the table, standing level with the Dragon Lord who had been worshipped during the day. Beneath the red cloth, the clay dragon statue seemed to be sizing up Chu Qing. However, at this moment, Chu Qing dared not look at the statue any longer. If this eerie phenomenon had truly materialized, even if he hadn't advanced to become a first-rank ferocious god, and was only at the lowest 9th rank level, he was still someone an ordinary person couldn't contend with at present. Therefore, Chu Qing suddenly waved his hand, and the red cloth on the Dragon Lord statue was instantly removed. A remarkably lifelike golden dragon head appeared. Unlike those mere sculptures, this Dragon King sculpture has a pair of real independent pupils on its face. Chu Qing didn't look at the eyes. Instead, she took out her phone, instinctively aimed it at the eyes and took a picture. Only then did she examine them closely. The eyes, seemingly made of some kind of gemstone, made the face of this dragon sculpture extremely lifelike. At first glance, it looks as if you are truly staring right into their eyes. However, Chu Qing was absolutely certain at that moment that these were real eyes. Although he said he left Los Angeles after the Age of Terror and was not affected by the destruction of Los Angeles in his previous life, he had grown up in Los Angeles and had carefully investigated the destruction of Los Angeles in his previous life. Naturally, their understanding of this blood-eyed dragon lord far surpasses that of ordinary people. In the beginning, the source of its power was these eyes. After the Age of Terror descended, these eyes became the true form of this blood-eyed dragon lord. At the same time, this is also the main reason why the other party became king, after the arrival of the Age of Terror. Having been given a second chance at life, Chu Qing, having chosen to risk his life, naturally wanted to select the most promising ghost to merge with himself. This will become his biggest trump card in the face of countless bizarre and vengeful ghosts, and his many schemes as the era of terror descends. So looking at the pair of blood-red eyes in the phone screen, which seemed to be carved from chicken blood stone, Chu Qing suddenly reached out and plunged his hand into the eye sockets of the Dragon Lord statue. Normally, the pupil in this eye socket should be like a ball in the mouth of a stone lion, impossible to remove no matter what. However, when Chu Qing's finger entered the eye socket of the Dragon Lord sculpture, the pupil, which resembled a bloodstone bead, seemed to spin around on its own. If Chu Qing hadn't been so confident, he probably would never have known this. Those eyes seemed to possess a mind of their own, trying to evade Chu Qing's detection. However, the Age of Terror had not yet fully arrived. Even with its abilities and rules for killing, and despite its extraordinary potential, it never reached the level of power that would later become. That pupil only a few centimeters in size, how could it possibly escape Chu Qing's notice? His fingers suddenly gripped tightly, and it was too late for the pupils to escape. From beginning to end, Chu Qing did not meet those eyes for even a second. Strangely, even newly born abilities based on rules were enough to kill a human who had no chance to resist. It doesn't feel as hard as a gemstone. Instead, it's somewhat soft like a flexible gallbladder. Therefore, he easily removed it from the eye socket of the Dragon King sculpture. It worked. He carefully placed the two blood-red eyeballs into a pre-prepared metal box before taking a taxi home. When I sat back down on the bed, it was already 11 p.m. The snow-white moonlight shone on Chu Qing's face, which was slightly flushed from running. At the same time, it also allowed Chu Qing to quickly regain her composure. Inside the iron box, two blood-red eyeballs seemed to radiate a faint, eerie blood-red light even under the moonlight. Chu Qing took a deep breath. After feeling his wildly pounding heart calm down as quickly as possible, he reached out his hand. He finally touched the blood-red eyeball inside the iron box with his own hands. Then, after about half a minute, the slow movement of those eyes stopped, and a pair of indistinct black vertical pupils in the blood-red light seemed to be staring at him as well. Finally, Chu Qing smiled and without thinking grabbed the fruit knife next to her and plunged it straight into her left eye socket. Crimson splatter, tick-tock, tick-tock. It was like a tap that wasn't turned off completely. Inside the room, the oppressive silence was accompanied by a jarring, somewhat frightening sound. Crimson liquid dripped from between Chu Qing's fingers as she covered her eyes, falling into the iron box. Bathed in this crimson liquid, the two equally blood-red eyeballs seemed to grow even brighter, a stinging sensation. This is excruciating pain that could cause many people to faint instantly. However, Chu Qing's expression remained unchanged throughout. Although his clenched teeth and bulging veins on his forehead were enough to prove that even he had to endure such pain. However, that's not all. No one with any underworld position can control the supernatural. The only way is to merge oneself with the spirit. Moreover, the success rate is not high. Failure could result in severe injury, disability, or even sudden death. However, Chu Qing did it without hesitation. The Yellow River Blood-Eyed Dragon Lord was one of the most terrifying evil gods in his previous life, and it is also the only prototype of an evil god that Chu Qing can currently come into contact with. At this point, this strange phenomenon is merely a source, possessing limitless potential but weak strength. If one doesn't dare to act now, how can one even speak of vying for the throne or of the power of immortality? Chu Qing picked up the blood-red eyeball and then shoved it into the socket of the left eye that had been stabbed. The excruciating pain, enough to make one faint, and the rejection from his body caused Chu Qing's body to twitch slightly. However, Chu Qing supported herself and came to the mirror, put down her bloodied hand, and looked with her other eye at the empty and blood-stained left eye. Peristalsis. Within his blood-red eye socket, his left eye was constantly twitching. It was as if something was shifting and turning, adapting to this newborn nest. However, soon the thing started moving faster and faster. There was even a hint of unease, almost as if tears were welling up in their eyes. If Chu Qing hadn't immediately noticed something was wrong and covered her eyes with her hands, that thing probably would have come out again. Merge failed? How could this be? Chu Qing's face was contorted in rage. According to his understanding, these kinds of strange origins are from organ parts, and when they are so weak, their compatibility with the human body is extremely high. This blood-eyed dragon lord truly lives up to his reputation as a fierce and eerie being ranked among the top in the dragon kingdom in his previous life. There was no anxiety, no disappointment. At this moment, besides his ferocity, Chu Qing's eyes were filled with excitement and fervor. The higher the blood-eyed dragon lord's talent ability, the better. Chu Qing pressed firmly against her eye sockets, trying to stop the blood-red eyes from escaping. However, the blood-red eyes seemed to sense something was wrong and actually tried to crash directly into the nerves and brain behind the eye sockets. Once the brain is damaged, even with Chu Qing's terrifying willpower, he will inevitably fall into a coma or even die. However, once the blood eye escapes and fails to merge with one's own flesh and blood immediately, it can no longer be truly controlled when put back in. What to do? Chu Qing's mind stirred, but for the first time, a hint of hesitation appeared on her face. His only remaining right eye looked into the iron box, where another bloodshot eye seemed to be turning wildly and restlessly. These blood-red eyes, as a pair, are clearly a single entity. Is it only through merging together that things can be accomplished? However, if he fails, he will lose both his eyes. In this impending era of terror, even with some memories of his past life, it will likely be extremely troublesome. Even worse, premature death, to gamble or not to gamble. Clearly, Chu Qing didn't have much time to hesitate. Once Blood Eyes completely erupts in chaos, there won't even be a chance to gamble anymore. With this in mind, Chu Qing steeled her resolve. Without hesitation, before the pain had even subsided, he plunged the knife in again. The intense pain caused Chu Qing to briefly lose consciousness. He could barely control himself. He was about to completely faint at any moment. However, the terrifying willpower honed in his previous life forced him to forcefully insert the other eye, which he already held in his hand, into the shattered eye socket. At this moment, Chu Qing no longer had another eye to observe the changes in those pupils. He could only close his eyes tightly, using the faint strength of his eyelids to try and stop the pupils from escaping again. Finally, relying solely on touch, he could feel that the struggling, shifting blood-red eyes trying to escape were becoming increasingly weak, and only then did he breathe a sigh of relief. At the same time, the intense pain seemed to have lost its willpower. This completely pushed Chu Qing to her already near-limit limits, causing her to lose all consciousness and fall unconscious on the bed. The snow-white moonlight shone down. Beneath Chu Qing's closed eyelids, something seemed to be wriggling rapidly. If someone were to pry open the eye socket at this moment and look into its deepest part, they would see that within this bloodshot eye, the previously severed blood vessels and nerves are being rapidly repaired and reconnected. Even Chu Qing's shattered pupils were rapidly repaired within this blood-red hue. However, those originally black and white pupils slowly enveloped these bloodshot eyes. In the end, everything fell into silence. Under the cover of darkness, the entire city of Los Angeles fell into absolute silence. However, within this silence, many unknown secrets are taking root and sprouting. Bashan Cemetery in the northern suburbs. Compared to several large and well-known cemeteries in Los Angeles, this place appears desolate and dilapidated. If it weren't for the plaque and the relatively neat rows of tombstones, it would probably be mistaken for a chaotic cemetery. The reason is simple. According to legend, in the early years, in addition to the urns stored in the corresponding cemetery, this place also housed a large number of coffins and families where bodies were buried. The location of Bashan is even more remote and extremely shady. Therefore, there have always been rumors of this place being haunted. Tonight, it seems even more so. This godforsaken place, they don't even have streetlights, damn it. They said it was a great job, the pay's all right. I'm childless and wifeless, what's there to be afraid of? Come on, I'd prefer a female ghost. A man in his 40s, waving a flashlight and cursing, patrolled the summit of Bashan Mountain as if this could slightly lessen his fear. Here one can see the darkness below the mountain and the bright moon in the sky at a glance, although it is still desolate, overgrown, and eerily gloomy. However, just then a rustling sound came from not far away. The man's steps froze on the spot. Who? What kind of person? The flashlight pointed in that direction to the side of a cliff, where a jet-black cat stood, its eerie green pupils gleaming in the night. It paid no heed to the approaching man or the flashlight shining on it. The black cat, like a human, stood on its hind legs, its head raised, its two front paws touching each other as if it were bowing to something not far away while its whole body trembled. Holy crap, that scared the hell out of me. It was just a cat. The man wiped the cold sweat from his forehead, squatted down, picked up a stone, and was about to throw it at the black cat when in that instant he subconsciously glanced behind his crotch while the cat was still crouching. The man felt a chill run through his body as if all the blood in his body had frozen. A disheveled human face appeared before him, no more than 10 centimeters away. What's even more terrifying is that the face has no features whatsoever. There's only a blank mass of flesh beneath the hair. The mass of flesh suddenly split open, emitting a hollow sound. Did you see my face? Ah. A terrified scream shattered the silence atop the dark, gloomy northern mountain. The black cat then turned its head, its eerie green pupils glancing at the object with a hint of surprise before resuming its original posture, as if it were worshipping something. If someone were standing behind it, they would see that the black cat, trembling, seemed to be bowing to the entire North Mountain. Bang, 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 a dull knock sounded on the door. The sleeping Chu Qing frowned slightly as if she had not yet recovered from her previous state. Chu Qing, you're dead at home. Didn't we agree to go to the internship interview together today? I called you, but you didn't answer. Open the door now. A sound powerful enough to shake the entire floor came along with a knock on the door. This made Chu Qing, who seemed to still be asleep, furrow her brows even more. Chu Qing, you didn't hang up, did you? Wait a minute, I'll call the landlady and ask her to bring the keys. You idiot, it's just a breakup. Why are you making such a fuss for so many days? Pain, the indescribable pain and the burning sensation that seemed to be branded into his brain made Chu Qing involuntarily cover his eyes. The knocking on the door grew louder and louder, and Chu Qing suddenly opened her eyelids, which were almost glued shut by blood scabs. At this moment, the entire world was blood red. The bed and desk in front of me seemed to be covered by a blood-red curtain. It's hard to see clearly, yet it has an eerie sense of complete transparency. It worked. Chu Qing regained consciousness immediately. Although the view before him was completely different from that of humans, the fact that he could see things again was enough to prove that he had succeeded. He quickly pulled out his phone, ignoring the knocking at the door, and turned on the camera, pointing it at himself. In that blood-red gaze, he saw his own reflection. However, upon seeing this, Chu Qing was suddenly stunned. Those black and white eyes from before have vanished without a trace. What came into view was a pair of blood-red vertical pupils within dark eye sockets, almost the complete opposite of human pupils. Especially when Chu Qing looked at it, its blood-red vertical pupils instantly narrowed like pinholes, as if it were a ferocious beast locking onto its prey. It really worked. However, since the Age of Horror has not yet officially arrived, and the Book of Life and Death for the survivors has not yet been completed, Chu Qing cannot fully understand the effects and abilities of the blood eye through the Book of Life and Death. However, the thought had barely formed when a blood-red string of characters gradually materialized before Chu Qing's eyes. Blood Eyes rank, 9th grade category, entity symbiotic weird lifespan in the Underworld 3 months. An eye for an eye rule. After a certain period of eye contact, you can ignore the opponent's rule abilities and reflect them back. If the opponent has no rule abilities to activate, the activated ability will control living beings' ghosts, causing their bodies to flow with blood yin energy and dissipate, resulting in their death. The required eye contact time and the effect depend on the difference in rank and talent between the two parties. Having Keen Eyes ability can examine living beings, funerary objects, etc., and discern their grade, nature, rules, abilities, and lifespan. Symbiotic state, currently coexisting with humans, lifespan consumption is doubled, and a certain level of intelligence has begun to awaken. Promotion requirements, unknown note, how about it? What are my abilities, you lowly humans, you'd better serve me well. Even though Chu Qing had already guessed that the blood-eyed Dragon Lord, who was able to become one of the strongest ferocious gods in the Dragon Kingdom in his previous life, probably wouldn't be weak in terms of basic rules and abilities. However, after truly witnessing the blood-eyed demon's abilities, I still hadn't expected it. Ghosts have their own rules and abilities. The more powerful and high potential a ghost is, the easier it is to trigger its ability rules. In the early stages of the Age of Terror, the power of this rule meant certain death if triggered by a human. Therefore, in the early stages of the Age of Terror, the most important thing when facing the supernatural was to find out the rules by which it attacked. Only in this way could one escape the supernatural with a mortal body. But how difficult was that? Every instant death trigger rule that was discovered had to be achieved at the cost of human lives. Undoubtedly, the blood-eyed demon's rule of an eye for an eye, which can be activated simply by making eye contact, is enough to make it stand out among the killing rules of countless ghosts. Furthermore, is it even possible to disregard the opponent's rules and retaliate after initiating an attack? Not to mention the even more exaggerated ability to see the big picture. If one can understand the rules and abilities of a ghost, especially knowing the rules of a ghost, one can greatly increase their chances of survival and become invincible, especially in the early stages of a terrifying era. The only special one is the one that comes after. This was also something that made Chu Qing frown slightly. He wasn't surprised by their symbiotic relationship. In fact, the depletion of his lifespan was to be expected. However, to his surprise, this blood-eyed demon actually possessed a certain degree of awakened intelligence. Ghosts, when they are of relatively low rank, have no intelligence, only some instincts. It's like a wild beast that only knows how to enforce its own rules, wantonly killing and eating. Only after accumulating enough yin lifespan and advancing to around the 4th rank will one truly awaken wisdom and self-awareness. However, this blood-eyed demon actually developed rudimentary intelligence after symbiotic fusion with itself, and quite obviously, judging from the description, its intelligence was not low. I don't know if it's good or bad. As for the lifespan in the Underworld, that's quite simple. Not only will it be a hard currency in the future era of terror, but it will also be one of the most important things. Yin Shu or ghost money is a strange lifespan. It can be converted into ghost currency, although the exchange rate is a bit of a ripoff. At the same time, ghosts often need to spend a large amount of their lifespan to advance in order to improve their rank. More importantly, the vast majority of ghosts not only cannot increase their lifespan on their own, but also consume it. They can only gain their lifespan by killing humans to absorb their lifespan or by devouring their own kind. However, if humans were to convert to a profession related to the Underworld, they would possess various abilities and could naturally generate a lifespan within that Underworld. These yin lifespans can also help humans advance their yin rank and nourish the ghosts they control. Humans and ghosts are enemies, yet they are inseparable. Neither can live without the other. This is the distorted and hopeless world. What about my current situation? Since these blood-red eyes could exert some of the effects of the Book of Life and Death, they could naturally also see his own condition. As Chu Qing finished speaking, sure enough, the blood-red characters before him underwent another new change. Chu Qing grade, ungraded. Lifespan in the underworld, 3 months. Lifespan in the living world, 3 months. Symbiotic state. Lifespan is greatly reduced, allowing complete control over the blood-eyed demon. Note, I'm not commanding you, I'm just asking you to borrow my power for a bit. But human, don't die or I'll kick the bucket with you. Chu Qing's hand clenched suddenly. In his previous life, according to the Book of Life and Death, his lifespan was a full 60 years. Indeed, it's not easy for a mortal to control a monster, especially a vengeful ghost like the blood-eyed demon. A lifespan of 60 years reduced to only 3 months. Normally speaking, wouldn't that mean I only have 3 months to live? Of course, there are ways to increase a person's lifespan. Similarly, one's yin lifespan can be converted into yang lifespan. However, even if 3 months of yin lifespan were converted, it would only amount to 6 months. Not to mention, without yin lifespan, the blood-eyed demon would have no choice but to rebel. However, unless the blood-eyed demon goes on a killing spree to obtain that low-quality, low-cost yin lifespan, the only way for humans to directly increase their yin lifespan is to first become a yin official. Thinking of this, Chu Qing let out a breath. This time, the choice of a ghostly profession needs careful consideration. Just then, the incessant knocking on the door suddenly stopped, followed by the man's voice coming from outside. Hee, Sister Yun, I'm so sorry to trouble you again. I don't know what Chu Qing is up to. The next moment, a clear, crisp voice rang out. What happened to Chu Qing? I don't know. He's not answering the phone and there's no response when I knock on the door. Could he have disappeared? Speaking of which, he just broke up with his girlfriend a few days ago. Could he be thinking of doing something rash? As the words were spoken, the clattering of keys could be heard, followed by the crisp sound of the door lock being inserted. Chu Qing frowned, then glanced around. A fruit knife stained with blood. The dried bloodstains on the bedding were sprayed from the dried bloodstains on the metal box with dried scabs. This is clearly a crime scene. Although Chu Qing didn't care about the collapsing worldly rules now that he had been reborn, he didn't want to waste his precious time on such a trivial matter before the terror was about to strike. After quickly tidying up, he rushed into the bathroom. Door opened. 2 figures rushed in quickly. One was a young man who was clearly about the same age as Chu Qing, wearing glasses and appearing refined and cultured. The other one was a young woman in her 30s, dressed in a silk nightgown. Chu Qing. Just as the two were about to shout, they heard the sound of water coming from the bathroom. Then Chu Qing slowly stepped out, his handsome face streaked with water, looking suspiciously at the 2 menacing figures. Fang Ping, what's wrong with you all? Why are you in such a hurry? At this moment, Chu Qing was no different from usual. Their clear black and white eyes held surprise and confusion, as if they didn't understand what the 2 intruders wanted to do. Damn it, why are you even asking us? You didn't answer the phone, and I've been knocking on the door for ages without you coming back. I thought you were still hung up on Enryuxu and were going to do something drastic because of her. Enryuxu. Chu Qing blinked, thought for more than 10 seconds, and then remembered who it was. He smiled and said, I had a few drinks and didn't hear you, sorry. Upon hearing this, Fang Ping was even more taken aback. You're definitely up to something. How long has it been since I've heard you say sorry to me? Are you really having an accident? Chu Qing ignored him and instead looked at her landlady Su Xian, who was standing to the side. Sister Yun, I'm so sorry to have troubled you. Su Xian shook her head. Chu Qing, are you really all right? It's really nothing. Okay, I'll be going now. Fang Ping said you guys have interviews today. Good luck. Su Xian made a clenched fist. Thank you, let me see you off. Chu Qing wiped her face and led Su Xian to the door. Looking at the gentle and beautiful landlady in this attractive and alluring age, her gaze remained calm. Su Xian's identity and background are unknown. All that is known is that she is a wealthy woman. However, in her previous life, at the beginning of the terror resurgence and the arrival of the death game, this wealthy landlady died in her room. Not only Su Xian, but all the women in the entire building and later in the entire community died violent deaths, and their deaths were extremely gruesome and terrifying. It is rumored that someone once saw a strange girl in red on the balcony of the 16th floor where Su Xian lived. That red dress seemed to be made of blood and human skin. Later, it was said that when the blood-eyed dragon lord was promoted to the 2nd rank, he held a grand selection of concubines in Luo City, which had already turned into a ghost city. Among those selected was the red-clad eerie woman who now lives in the Happiness Garden. And clearly, if things proceed as they normally would, the beautiful young woman's body would soon become part of the red-clad girl's red dress. Thinking of this, a look of interest suddenly flashed in Chu Qing's eyes. He thought for a moment and said, Sister Yun, if anything unusual happens in the neighborhood, you can call me. His expression was calm, but his words were extremely serious, causing Su Xian to pause slightly before asking suspiciously, "Special circumstances? What special circumstances could there be? Chu Qing, are you just like those smooth-talking brats online, unwilling to work hard? Haha, boys should have their own careers. Anyway, I appreciate your kindness, but rent is due next month." Chu Qing's expression remained unchanged. He calmly replied, "Okay." Su Xian was someone he met by chance. Whether she lived or died was of little concern to him, so he let it go. More importantly, Chu Qing was very interested in the strange and mysterious red-clad girl who later became the blood-eyed dragon lord's concubine. Perhaps relying on Su Xian could attract the initial energy of that red-clad female ghost. When it is weak, it can be taken down more easily. Moreover, if possible, Chu Qing still hoped to retain some of his humanity as a human being. Besides, even in his previous life, he did not completely lose all his humanity like many other ghost tamers. At that time, he had contact with that being in the Dragon Kingdom who had been promoted to the first-rank Yin official position of King of Reincarnation. That wheel-turning king once told him, "For a demon tamer, the process of controlling demons is not only a struggle against the demons, but also a struggle against oneself. It's about fighting the madness in your heart, the obsession with yourself, and the coldness of humanity. The most important thing for a demon slayer is to know that they are human, and to always remember that they are human, not a demon. Otherwise, the underworld would become a means for people to transform into ghosts. King, the reason he is king. It means being able to control everything, not just evil spirits but also yourself. King Chu Qing of Chujiang is always a human being who controls evil spirits, rather than an evil spirit controlling human beings." Chu Qing was well aware of this. However, as he clearly understood, another part of him that was not yet fully under his control was obviously not satisfied with the tone and words of the young woman in front of him. Or rather, one can discern the true nature of this blood-eyed dragon lord from Chu Qing's memories. In an instant, Chu Qing's black and white eyes became completely out of control, suddenly turning blood red. Within the pitch-black eye sockets, only a blood-red vertical pupil suddenly appeared, instantly locking onto Su Xian before him. Just as Su Xian was about to turn around with a smile, her whole body suddenly stiffened. All the blood in her body rushed uncontrollably to her brain, and her black and white eyes became bloodshot. Her heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was about to explode. Almost immediately, he would bleed from all 7 orifices and die. In the blink of an eye, those terrifying blood-red vertical pupils vanished without a trace. Su Xian's uncontrollable heartbeat gradually calmed down. Su Xian looked at what was in front of her with some confusion. The young man before me still had a smile on his lips, and his smiling eyes were especially gentle. It was as if her slightly reproachful words had had no effect on the young man whatsoever. At that moment, Su Xian felt a rush of blood to her body and an inexplicable dizziness in her brain, causing her to instinctively grab onto the wall beside her. Chu Qing reached out and placed her hand on Su Xian's shoulder, but did not overstep the mark. "Sister Yun, are you all right?" Su Xian snapped out of her daze and quickly stopped. She stared blankly at Chu Qing, remembering how she thought she had just seen the young man's eyes turn. Is it a hallucination? Or is it because I've been dieting and eating too little these days? Soon, Su Xian shook her head and stood up straight again. "Excuse me, I might be having a bit of low blood sugar, Chu Qing. Please don't take what I said earlier to heart. If you need any help, feel free to ask me. I'll be going now." Seeing Su Xian's pale face and her hurried departure, seemingly unaware of what had happened, Chu Qing felt little pleasure in stirring the rich woman's emotions. Instead, she frowned slightly, calmly covering one of her eyes and silently saying, "This is the first time and I hope it's the last. If I lose control, I'm capable of gouging out my own eyes, let alone yours. And don't forget, it's because of me that you have some wisdom." In an instant, the black and white pupils turned crimson again, then rapidly shifted between black and white and crimson. It seemed extremely dissatisfied with Chu Qing's attitude and tried to break free, but could not escape the prison of this body. He struggled for more than 10 seconds. Finally, things returned to calm. At the same time, Fang Ping, who had been waiting impatiently in the room, came out and glanced at Chu Qing, who was still standing there seemingly in a daze. "Kingzi, stop dwelling on it. Sister Yun is from a completely different world than us. Are you still going to the Tianyu Entertainment interview or not?" Tianyu Entertainment is a well-known entertainment company in Los Angeles, with a gaming business under its umbrella. Chu Qing and Fang Ping are both art students at a local university in Los Angeles. In this era, the job market for art majors, especially fine arts majors, is such that graduation almost equates to unemployment. Finding such an internship opportunity is quite difficult. However, Chu Ching turned her head away. Go by yourself, I've already found a job. Huh, when did this happen? Fang Ping glared at him. Just now. What kind of job? Chu Ching arrived at the door, picked up the job posting from the Luocheng Morning Post that had been delivered there that morning, and pointed to a tiny, almost non-existent job posting. Beishan Cemetery is hiring security guards and gatekeepers. Room and board provided. Monthly salary 6,000 RMB plus 5 social insurances and 1 housing fund plus meal allowance. Easy work, relatively flexible hours. Preference will be given to those who are bold and unafraid of superstition. The sun was shining brightly, and it was rather hot. Such a temperature not only failed to allow Chu Ching to rediscover the warmth of the world, but also made him, who was already accustomed to darkness and cold, feel slightly uncomfortable. Fortunately, after getting out of the taxi, looking at the gate of the cemetery backed by mountains and without even a small shop around, that familiar chill welled up in his heart again, giving Chu Ching a sense of peace. Beishan Cemetery. The doorplate was a bit worn with rust growing on the edges. The entire cemetery, from its main gate to its interior, exudes an air of decay. Beishan is actually the edge of Beiman Mountain. Throughout the entire Dragon Kingdom, this place is extremely famous. This is the place where the most emperors, nobles, and generals of past dynasties are buried. And it is precisely for this reason this place was once extremely prosperous. Although Beishan Cemetery is some distance from the actual Beiman Mountain area, where the tombs of emperors and generals have been designated as key cultural relics for protection. However, if one could benefit from this auspicious influence and have 1 or 2 descendants who become extremely wealthy and powerful, that would be wonderful. However, just by looking at the scene here, one can already tell how business is doing these days. Besides the fact that it is a public cemetery, the maintenance of Beishan Cemetery is inadequate, and there are also rumors of it being haunted. Therefore, even during the day, this huge cemetery is deserted, and there doesn't seem to be a single staff member present. However, very soon, a young man ran out of a private car parked far away on the roadside. You must be Chu Ching. I'm from the Beishan office. My name is Su Wei. The young man seemed extremely anxious, and after Chu Ching nodded, he continued without speaking. You've seen the benefits, right? Our work is relatively flexible. You just need to patrol once a day at 6:00 a.m. and 10:30 p.m., take photos, and clock in. After that, you don't need to do anything else. You can go home at night if you want, or you can stay here. If there are no problems, sign this form and you can officially start work today. Before Chu Ching could react, Su Wei handed her a form, looking impatient. Looking at it like that, wouldn't any normal person feel something was off? They didn't even seem inclined to go inside and take a look. It was as if simply standing at the door was already their limit. Chu Ching saw all of this but didn't care. He even took it and quickly signed his name on it. He came to apply for the cemetery security guard position not because he cared much about the so-called benefits, but for another matter. In his previous life, his profession in the underworld was that of a paper craftsman. He managed to make the most of his mediocre artistic skills in this role, and he did quite well in the early stages. However, in this life, after being reborn yesterday afternoon, Chu Ching had new ideas about his first yin-yang job. There are many options for the 9th rank Underworld official position. In fact, Chu Ching knew of no fewer than several dozen. Each has its own abilities and areas of expertise, and their methods of controlling demons are also quite unique. However, as the rank of a yin profession increases, the higher the rank, the rarer the number of yin professions becomes. Moreover, the difficulty of advancing to the next level is several times greater than that of advancing as a ghost. At the same time, some high-ranking underworld positions require corresponding low-ranking underworld positions to be promoted. For example, according to legend, the king of Mount Tai, who was ranked among the 10 kings of hell, held a second-rank position in the underworld. Only by becoming the Lord of Mount Tai could one be promoted to King of Mount Tai. The promotion to the position of the Mountain Lord of Mount Tai requires the 9th rank Mountain Citizen Underworld official route. The path and advancement of one's profession are crucial to future achievements and potential. Besides combat strength, the most important factor in assessing yin-type abilities is the acquisition of yin-type lifespan. The paper craftsman's combat strength and ability to control ghosts among the underworld professions are barely above average, and his path to advancing to the 8th rank of the underworld profession is also acceptable. However, it was definitely not the best choice for the 9th rank yin official position he had in mind. This is because obtaining the lifespan of a paper craftsman is relatively much more difficult. To gain an extra lifespan in the underworld, one needs to fold a paper figure that resembles oneself, write one's birth date and time on it, and then burn it. It sounds easy, but the folding process is extremely troublesome. If the folds don't closely resemble the originals, all the previous efforts will be wasted, materials will be squandered, and there's even a risk of shortening one's lifespan. Moreover, the path for the paper craftsman to advance to the Zhongshan rank was already very narrow. He only had the chance to become the king of Chujiang by changing his rank to the yin rank when he was about to advance to the 6th rank. Therefore, he would absolutely not consider becoming a paper craftsman in this lifetime. Among the yin professions that Chu Qing knew, the one that granted the highest maximum yin lifespan was right before his eyes. In this lifetime, Chu Qing's chosen underworld post was the Gravedigger. During the terrifying era of the previous life, it was criticized by countless people, and even later it was known as the most deceptive 9th-rank yin profession. The reason is simple: the upper and lower limits of this tomb keeper are simply too high. However, there is only one person who can be a tomb keeper, and that person is Bian Cheng Wang, who caused Bian Cheng Wang to fail in his promotion to King of Chujiang. It is said that Bian Cheng Wang was a 9th-rank ghost official who was a tomb keeper. However, there was only one King Bian Cheng, but the lower limit was what almost all the tomb keepers had actually experienced. You can tell what this gravedigger does just by looking at his name. All they need to do is guard the tomb. However, becoming a recognized profession in this bizarre era's death game is by no means so simple or easy. The tomb keeper is responsible for guarding the resurrected spirits within the tomb. During the darkest hours before dawn each night, he must ensure that all the evil spirits have returned to the tomb and guarantee its peace. In this way, one can automatically convert the lifespan gained during the daytime each day. Furthermore, the more numerous and of higher quality the strange creatures within the tomb, the more lifespan one will gain in the underworld. And most importantly, there's virtually no upper limit. For tomb keepers, as long as they can control the evil spirits in their tombs, they can simply lie back and earn more lifespan. For ordinary ghost hunters who are just beginning to become tomb guardians, this is an incredibly difficult task, and many have even been killed by the strange creatures within the tomb if they are not careful. However, for Chu Qing, who now possesses memories of so many years from the terrifying era and the ability of his blood eyes, isn't this the most suitable underworld job for him? More importantly, in his previous life, Chu Qing had seen some things in a very special secret realm. A very strange mural, the records above are faded and worn, but Chu Qing remembers them vividly. Because that secret realm had an extremely terrifying origin and was incredibly dangerous, many of the second-rank ghost masters of the Dragon Kingdom perished there. He went through great hardships to enter a grand hall, where, apart from a single bead, there was only this mural. However, the murals were extremely complex, and the records associated with them were quite chaotic. But he remembered with perfect clarity that on that mural, several 9th-rank yin officials were highlighted, and the one mentioned most frequently was this, the Gravedigger. At the same time, this tomb keeper was also the initial 9th-rank yin official of Ding Zai, the king of Bian Cheng, who was his best friend at the time but turned against him at the last moment and delivered the fatal blow. Once you go inside, the small incense shop guardhouse on your left is your place. There's a bed and some daily necessities inside. You can stay there if you don't mind, or you can move in. Also, that incense and candle shop has the phone numbers for wreaths, paper figures, and incense distributors. You could start a small business there, but you'd be responsible for your own profits. Then, after starting work at 8 a.m. on the first day of each month, you'd go to the office 2 kilometers away to collect your salary. After the young man named Su Wei finished rambling on, he handed Chu Qing the keys, got into his car without stopping, and drove away from the entrance of Beishan Cemetery. From beginning to end, he never stepped into the cemetery. Chu Qing didn't care at all. He took the key, opened the locked iron gate of Beishan Cemetery, and strode inside. However, Chu Qing paused slightly as soon as she entered. He now understood why that guy wouldn't even step into the cemetery. Beishan Cemetery, as its name suggests, is a barren mountain belonging to the Beimeng mountain range. Besides an empty cemetery at the foot of the mountain, there is also a small hill encompassing the area. Although the mountain is only about 200 or 300 meters high, according to the introduction of Beishan Cemetery, the higher the location, the more valuable the original burial plot was, and the higher the price. Of course, along with the decline of Beishan Cemetery, many ancestors who were indeed wealthy families in the past have changed their feng shui and moved away from Beishan Cemetery long ago. This Beishan Cemetery is indeed very empty now, with hardly any tombstones. It is precisely this emptiness that makes one feel a little uneasy. In fact, Bashan Cemetery is in a good location, not far from the Yellow River. Beyond these few barren mountains lies the rolling Yellow River. The front of the building connects to a major suburban road, and there is plenty of open space in the surrounding area, offering significant potential for development. This cemetery is located in such a place. Chu Qing didn't know anything about Feng Shui. However, upon entering the cemetery, he noticed a wisp of gray aura. This gray color is invisible to the average person, but it is clearly visible under Chu Qing's gaze. It was none other than the legendary yin energy, or rather, ghostly energy. Although the terrifying era will officially begin in the early hours of 2 days from now, there are quite a few cases like the blood-eyed dragon lord that show strange signs of impending doom. This northern mountain is probably one of them. No wonder that guy turned and left. Moreover, judging from the sheer strength of the remaining yin energy, it's likely that the strange entity within has already devoured the lifespan of the living and tasted their flesh. In other words, someone died in this place before. Thinking of this, he smiled faintly. From the perspective of the gravedigger, he was very satisfied with this large cemetery. Not only is it huge enough, but its terrain is also diverse. There are many tombs that can be explored due to the gathering of yin energy. In the future, it can accommodate more strange creatures, so that the mindless monsters that only know how to kill in the early stages will not fight each other. Most importantly, they even gave you a vengeful ghost as a starting bonus. Although he didn't know her potential or talent, and it was impossible for her to become his tomb ghost, Chu Qing had already decided on the candidate for tomb ghost. However, the biggest advantage of the tomb guardians compared to other ghost-controlling professions is that the more vengeful ghosts they command, the better. So what are these eerie ghosts? To him, they're living, breathing money-printing machines for the dead. As for tomb ghosts, their meaning is self-evident. These are vengeful spirits completely controlled by the underworld guardians of the tomb and can only roam within the tomb's boundaries. This is also the most frustrating aspect of the tomb guardian's job. Once they leave the tomb, they are not much better than ordinary people, if not more so. However, within the tomb area, the tomb guardians and tomb spirits are quite formidable in combat. Therefore, even with the blood-eyed demon, the value and significance of this first tomb demon are still very important. With that thought in mind, Chu Qing took a step and slowly arrived at the place where the yin energy was dense. Before he could summon his blood eyes to examine the source of the yin energy, a strange sound rang out from the side. Meow tilde. Chu Qing turned her head to look. A black cat sat upright on a dilapidated stone tablet covered with unknown vines, its orange-green eyes curiously observing Chu Qing. A wisp of yin energy swirled around it. A demonic cat that has come into contact with the supernatural and absorbed yin energy, thus beginning its awakening. Chu Qing's lips curled up, she squatted down and stretched out her hand. Meow. The black cat looked at Chu Qing with some surprise, but it was not afraid of people at all. It jumped down from the stone tablet and came to Chu Qing's side. The black cat was only about 30 centimeters long, looking very small. Its thin, bony body was covered in pure black fur, which shone with a deep red hue in the sunlight. Ancient texts record that the black cat is entirely black, turning brownish red in sunlight, and is believed to ward off evil spirits. I stroked the black cat's body, and the cat, which had been trembling slightly, immediately began to purr contentedly. Chu Qing then asked, "Little guy, someone died here before, right?" Strangely enough, as soon as he spoke these words, the black cat in his hand, which had just settled down, began to tremble like a leaf again. It seemed to understand human speech. Chu Qing continued to stroke the black cat's somewhat messy fur, smiling as she said, "Don't be afraid, I know, it's not your fault, you didn't do it. You just happened to sip some leftovers while that thing was feeding, right? Meow." Upon hearing Chu Qing speak, the black cat's cries suddenly became incredibly shrill. Her previous obedient demeanor vanished completely. Her orange-green pupils suddenly turned into pinholes, staring in terror at Chu Qing in front of her, or perhaps, looking behind Chu Qing. An inexplicable chill came from behind me. Even though it's still daytime, Chu Qing narrowed her eyes slightly but did not turn around rashly. The rules of murder are bizarre and ever-changing. Who knows what kind of rules and abilities this ghost possesses? And so, under the increasingly terrified gaze of the black cat, Chu Qing's black and white eyes suddenly turned completely black and red. Within his dark eye sockets, his blood-red vertical pupils were firmly locked onto the black cat. Then, Chu Qing slowly turned around. It was an illusory figure. In the crimson-tinged observation, this figure wore a tattered, decaying white dress, making it impossible to discern her original appearance. His gray, dry hair obscured his face, making it impossible to see anything clearly. However, the blood-red pupils locked on and the eyes with pupils effect activated instantly. All the abilities of the ghostly creature before him were fully revealed in Blood Eye's observation. Mumenki rank, 9th grade. Category, Earthbound Spirit, lifespan in the Underworld. 9 months and 17 days, face of fear, rule. By creating an atmosphere and scene of fear, the will of living beings can be weakened. When a human's will falls below a critical threshold, and they are gripped by extreme fear, the true faceless ghost will be revealed, triggering a face-swap death. The effectiveness of creating fear depends on the rank and talent abilities of both parties. Ghostly Illusion ability creates a ghostly illusion within a certain range, weakening the will of living beings and plunging them into extreme fear. Bound Spirit status, unable to leave the North Mountain Cemetery area. Within the cemetery, ability recovery speed is increased. Daily lifespan consumption is halved. Promotion requirements. Unknown note. Hey, you're not scared by something like this, are you? But our appearance seems to fit its aesthetic standards quite well, tilde. Looking at the rules and abilities of the faceless ghost emanating from the blood-red eyes at this moment, Chu Qing couldn't help but sigh once again that the blood-eyed dragon lord's rule abilities truly allowed him to thrive. However, Chu Qing's eyes twitched very quickly. Unfortunately, the problem now is, since this thing doesn't have a face, how do you make eye contact with it? Silence, deathly stillness. The sun shone brightly overhead over the entire Bashan cemetery, yet inside it was as cold as an icebox. The two figures stood facing each other, motionless. Only the black cat, looking at the two figures who were clearly not human, kept its distance with a terrified expression. As time passed, Chu Qing could clearly feel a sense of fear slowly emerging in his heart. This fear wasn't due to a lack of willpower on his part. Rather, it was because the faceless ghost's rule-based abilities were already being activated. Although the fear wasn't particularly pronounced without special context, he could still feel it arising involuntarily. He knew that even with the blood eyes, this faceless ghost was already a 9th-rank eerie being. Although that rule-based ability wasn't particularly powerful, it was still enough to easily kill him in his current state once triggered. What he needs to do is to make the other party be countered by his own rules before the other party's rules take effect. But the frustrating thing was that the first truly bizarre encounter was with a creature that had no eyes. However, the Blood Eye's rule-based ability requires the opponent to make eye contact with him to activate it. How can we make eye contact if we don't have eyes? This is a problem. However, even in such a critical moment, Chu Qing showed no panic whatsoever. Having mastered the bizarre rules of murder, he could always maintain the upper hand. Even if they cannot be subdued, they can always withdraw. Thinking of this, Chu Qing looked at the face hidden by dry hair and smiled slightly. What a pitiful thing, doesn't it even have its own face? Upon hearing this, the black cat that had already leaped back onto the tombstone looked at Chu Qing as if it had seen a ghost. Even the faceless demon, who possessed almost no intelligence, was slightly taken aback. Then came fury. Low-level monsters lack intelligence, yet like wild beasts they can sense emotions. In fact, this faceless ghost before them used the other's emotions as its rule for killing. It sensed no fear from Chu Qing, only utter mockery. In an instant, the Bashan cemetery seemed to turn into a cloudy day. The sun disappeared from the sky, and in the pitch black, the sound of the wind could be heard from time to time. That feeling of fear became even more ever-present. Chu Qing, however, remained unconcerned. The blood-red eyes remained fixed on the faceless ghost, and the ghost even reached out to try and manipulate its ethereal body. Unfortunately, the opponent was a bound spirit without a physical body and could not be touched by hand. All that could be touched was a cold sensation. After noticing this, Chu Qing withdrew her hand and continued, "What do you think of my face? I was considered one of the most handsome guys in school. This face should fit your aesthetic, right? Yes, those are Blood Eye's exact words, so there shouldn't be any problem." Meanwhile, the black cat continued to watch Chu Qing's actions, which were practically dancing in a minefield. Chu Qing slowly touched her head to the faceless ghost, and the foreheads of the two, one human and one ghost, even seemed to touch. "Look at these eyes again, aren't they beautiful? They're bright red like rubies. Don't you want to cut them off and put them on yourself?" Chu Qing blinked her blood-red eyes. He ignored the shame and resistance emanating from the bloodshot eyes, seemingly playing a prank, but in reality his heart was pounding. Fighting ghosts is like walking a tightrope at all times, unless you have an overwhelming advantage in rank. Especially something like this, which has little intelligence and is like a wild beast. In the early to mid stages of a ghost master's journey, the essence of fighting ghosts lies in finding and breaking the rules, using one's own ability to control ghosts to fight against those rules. The blood eyes rule is activated by eye contact. But it's never said that eye contact necessarily requires the use of eyes. Ghost's perception isn't just about sight. Therefore, what he is doing now is to deeply explore the rules of blood eye. If things go smoothly, all will be well. If not, there's always the option to turn around and run away. As it turns out, Chu Qing's blood-red eyes are truly beautiful. In the dark, labyrinthine environment, those blood-red eyes seem to gleam. As the fear that involuntarily arose in Chu Qing's heart grew stronger, finally, almost simultaneously, Chu Qing and Blood Eye himself felt a special gaze directed at them. Or rather, he looked at his own face and at the pair of scarlet eyes on that face. A broken voice followed. "So, a beautiful face, eyes, give them to me." In an instant, a crimson light blazed in Chu Qing's eyes. The rules of the blood eyes activated instantly at that moment. Chu Qing had already calculated in his mind the time it would take for the blood-eyed ghost to make eye contact with the faceless ghost, who was also a 9th-rank demon, to activate its rules. 1 breath, less than 2 seconds. Indeed, the potential of blood eyes is beyond imagination. However, with its own keen observation skills, Blood Eye is unable to analyze the weight levels of the corresponding rules. We must wait until the eerie era arrives to examine it using the Book of Life and Death. However, this was not the time for Chu Qing to be distracted. Almost the instant the blood eye rule was activated, the body of the faceless ghost in front of him began to tremble violently. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. This is the blood eye's rule-based ability. Once activated, it completely negates any abilities used by the opponent's ghost, and at the same time, returns them back to the opponent with double the damage. What terrifying power to control rules. At this moment, Chu Qing's deliberate act of courting death also brought about the effect of an eye for an eye. Tremble. The faceless demon began to tremble violently. The fear that had been inflicted on Chu Qing was returned to the other party through these 2 blood-red eyes. In its eyes, those 2 blood-red eyes had already filled its entire field of vision, as if they could devour it at any moment. Overwhelmed by instinctive fear, it knelt down, burying its head hidden beneath its withered hair between its arms. No more. "Face, don't touch my face." A profound fear gripped him. At this moment, Chu Qing clearly felt that within the rule of an eye for an eye and under the rule of the faceless ghost's own fear, he could kill this faceless ghost with a mere thought. Just like a diner who puts food in their mouth to chew and can swallow it at any time once it's almost chewed, this is the instinct of a ghost to kill after triggering the rules. However, Chu Qing did not do so. Although killing this faceless ghost and absorbing it with his blood-red eyes should have yielded some of his lifespan, these ghosts, born before the Age of Terror has officially arrived, possess considerable potential. Although Chu Qing had witnessed the creature's abilities, he had no intention of turning it into his own tomb spirit. However, judging from the terrifying effect of leaving it in the tomb, it is estimated that it will become a stable source of ghosts for a long time to come. Moreover, it's a bound spirit practically destined to be a laborer. So he lowered his head, and even though he couldn't touch the faceless ghost with his palm, he still reached out and touched it before smiling gently and saying, "Don't worry, as long as you behave, I won't peel your face off. In fact, if you behave well, I'll even find you a face you like to use. How about it?" Clearly, the faceless ghost's intelligence was insufficient to comprehend these words. It merely trembled in response to Chu Qing's actions and perceived emotions. However, it also expressed obedience. Ghosts have no intelligence, are like wild beasts, but they do not seek death on their own. The midday sun was bright and intense. It was as if it wanted to completely dispel the darkness from this gloomy place. The light and shadow shone on Chu Qing's disheveled black hair, softening his gloomy aura considerably. Chu Qing slowly stood up, looked to the side, and then stretched out her hand. The black cat trembled all over but dared not refuse his call and leaped back into his arms. Chu Qing smiled and picked up the black cat, facing the blazing sun behind her, looking at the Beishan cemetery in front of her, and the entire Mangshan mountain. "With me here, no one will be able to bully you." However, at that moment, the cemetery gate behind them was pushed open, making a rattling sound. Chu Qing turned her head and looked inside, only to see Fang Ping prying at the door. "Chu Qing, dude, I've come to check out your workplace. Look who I brought." Chu Qing looked through the rusty iron gate at Fang Ping's side. She was a girl around their age, wearing a Chanel long dress, her Valentino-studded high-heeled sandals gleaming in the sunlight, and carrying a toffee-colored Hermes calfskin bag. After carefully going through the information in his mind, Chu Qing finally remembered who this person was. His ex-girlfriend during this period in Ryuxu, and his previous life, Chu Qing experienced a terrifying era that lasted for over 20 years. For more than 20 years, his attention had long since shifted to more important matters. The lineage of Yama, the hierarchy of underworld officials, the acquisition of lifespan in the underworld, the embryonic form of great calamity. He would have forgotten most of the trivial matters that preceded the terror if it weren't for his improved yin rank, which granted him photographic memory. Clearly, for Chu Qing, his ex-girlfriend, who looked pitiful and even somewhat remorseful, was a trivial matter. Chu Qing vaguely remembered that in her previous life, this woman got together with a rich second generation before she was about to graduate. However, before he could even grieve for 2 months, the age of terror arrived, and in the face of life and death, this little thing became insignificant. How did she manage to get through this? Unbeknownst to her, the faceless ghost had vanished without a trace. Chu Qing, holding the black cat in her arms, arrived at the door and smiled. "Fang Ping, what brings you here?" Fang Ping scratched his head. "I'm waiting for the results after the interview. Guess what? I saw Ryuxu as soon as I came out of Tianyu Entertainment. She specifically asked about you, and since we were both free, we thought we'd come and see you together." Towards the end, Fang Ping became somewhat cautious. It's obvious he lied. In fact, it was because he was really worried about Chu Qing's condition that he took the initiative to call in Ryuxu and come to check on Chu Qing. There was no other way. Chu Qing's decision to become a security guard at such a chaotic graveyard saved him 30 years of detours, and those detours were the most sinister and dark ones. This made Fang Ping, who had a long-standing relationship with him, think the worst. Chu Qing naturally noticed her friend's guilty conscience but didn't pay it any mind. He glanced at the two of them before saying, "Come in." The two followed Chu Qing inside. However, whether it was their imagination or not, they felt a chill run down their spines the moment they stepped into the cemetery. Clearly, no normal person would have the leisure to come to this godforsaken place. This further convinced Fang Ping of his suspicions. "My buddy was devastated by a breakup." Thinking of this, he looked at Ryuxu beside him, who pursed her red lips and nodded. "We entered the guardhouse and incense shop that had been promised to be used as dormitories. The place was clean and spacious enough. However, looking around at everything, Ryuxu casually found a seat and sat down, then spoke apologetically. "Chu Qing, I'm sorry, I know I hurt you, but you don't have to." Chu Qing stared speechlessly at the woman who looked so choked up. To be honest, his ex-girlfriend was quite cunning. He remembered how she had completely won over that rich second-generation heir in his previous life. If it weren't for the arrival of this strange era, her plan to rise to the top would have had a very high chance of succeeding. Even though she didn't become a wealthy wife, she later became a ghost master who established herself in the early days of Lo's Angels. Unfortunately, he ultimately could not escape the calamity that destroyed Lo's Angels. He died amidst the ghostly horde. Chu Qing waved his hand. "All right, I don't blame you. Lots of couples break up during graduation season. Your choice is perfectly understandable. Don't take it to heart." Upon hearing this, Ryuxu felt even more guilty. "I know you're pretending nothing's wrong, but I understand you've come to a place like this to escape. I'm sorry, can you add me back on WeChat?" Ryuxu gazed tenderly at the man before her. The man in front of her possessed an indescribable charm, coupled with his status as the campus heartthrob at their second-rate university, and what she later experienced, it was impossible for her not to be attracted. However, Ryuxu also understood that these things wouldn't put food on the table after graduation. So she almost didn't think twice before throwing herself into the arms of a very wealthy and powerful second-generation rich kid in Liucheng. However, seeing Chu Qing again today, with that indescribable special temperament and that mysterious feeling of excitement, reminded her of the past. So she took the initiative to hold out her phone, her beautiful eyes looking at Chu Qing pleadingly. Chu Qing frowned slightly. He truly didn't want to have anything to do with this woman. Saying you can't let go is pure nonsense. After all, it was a mutual arrangement. He enjoyed it himself, and on many occasions, Ryuxu even paid for the hotel rooms. Therefore, talk of anger and resentment is utter nonsense. Not to mention the ex-girlfriend in front of him, whom he couldn't even remember who she was even after his rebirth. Even if it was King Dingzai of Biancheng who ruined his plans in his previous life. Or even who later deceived and betrayed him, it didn't quite reach the level of making him want to take revenge and skin him alive right now, or make him want to eat his flesh and drink his blood. They can only be described as enemies who must be killed in this lifetime. A king is never just someone of power, and an invincible heart. Revenge is inevitable, and Chu Qing has already made the first step in his plan. However, for someone whose heart is disturbed by revenge, it is simply impossible to become a king-level demon slayer in such a terrifying era, facing the corrupting influence of demons on people's hearts. bearing 1,000 sins, yet forging an indomitable spirit. Hatred was utterly insignificant compared to his lofty ideals and aspirations. He did this simply because he found it troublesome. However, it was clear that his resistance led Fang Ping and Ryuxu to misunderstand. Fang Ping coughed lightly. "Well, you two chat first, I'll go for a walk outside." After saying that, he really turned and left, completely unaware of what he might face alone outside. And Ryuxu, however, seemed oblivious to Chu Qing's speechless expression. Instead, she looked tenderly at the black cat in Chu Qing's arms. "You still love cats so much. Our little dumpling we raised together is still with me." However, seeing that Chu Qing remained unmoved, she finally continued speaking. "Chu Qing, we're both orphans. We both know that in this society, in this era, without money, you're worse off than a dog. And a woman's only asset, besides her youthful appearance, is nothing else. She can only keep striving to climb higher." Chu Qing smiled. Finally, they were getting to the point. He eagerly awaited the humiliation his ex-girlfriend was about to inflict upon him. However, even Chu Qing, who in his previous life was just one step away from becoming the king of Chujiang, never expected that his ex-girlfriend would suddenly change the subject and continue speaking. "But Ah Qing, I still love you. Add me as a friend. I have 10,000 yuan here for you to take. Lin Hengxian and I have already registered our marriage, but we haven't officially held a wedding yet. They've been busy with family matters lately, so I haven't had much time. How about this? I'll give you money every month and we'll meet secretly here when we have time." Hearing this, even though Chu Qing had experienced a lot in his previous life, he was still completely taken aback by the woman's words. And Ryuxu, after saying this, glanced around and nodded in satisfaction. "You know what? This place is secluded enough, a good spot to meet. Don't worry, Lin Hengxian's father's health hasn't been good lately, and the Lin family's assets will all be Lin Hengxian's in a few years. That guy's a good-for-nothing. I'll work hard to get my hands on the assets then, and then I'll divorce him." Chu Qing remained silent, watching the woman in front of him talking to herself. Wasn't this supposed to be a story of triumphs and tribulations, with characters constantly changing their fortunes and getting their comeuppance? How did it suddenly turn into a villainous male supporting character and a mistress? And Ryuxu looked at Chu Qing in front of her and felt a little impulsive. Even if these words are the truth, they shouldn't be spoken casually. The fewer people who know, the smoother the plan will go. There was no way around it. Looking at the man's melancholy demeanor and his predicament in this desolate, God-forsaken place, her heart softened. "Unfortunately, we don't have much time today." Chu Qing was speechless. He shook his head about to explain the situation. But Ryuxu didn't give him that chance and continued directly. "It's settled then. I've been very busy lately. There's been trouble at the Lin family's place, so I haven't been able to go out much." No sooner had she finished speaking than the roar of an engine came from outside the door. Suddenly, Ryuxu's expression changed, and sure enough, she heard Fang Ping's voice coming from outside the door. "Lin Hengxian, how did you find your way here?" Chu Qing raised an eyebrow and looked at Ryuxu with great interest. And Ryuxu, standing before them, reacted just as quickly. She immediately stood up, pulled a wad of cash from the latest Hermes calfskin bag and tossed it to Chu Qing. "Take these first. Lin Hengxian is here. You and he had a falling out before, so don't go out, just leave everything to me." After saying that, Ryuxu quickly opened the door and ran out. Chu Qing could still hear her sickeningly sweet voice from inside the security room. "Honey, what brings you here? Weren't you at the hospital with Dad?" Chu Qing smiled. His eyes turned blood red again at that moment. In the shadows of the corner of the sunlight, those blood-red eyes moved rapidly and irregularly in their dark sockets, as if praising the wonderful little drama that had just unfolded. Then Chu Qing seemed to be talking to herself, yet also seemed to be smiling at the two beings in the room who did not belong to the same kind, and asked, "Humans, aren't they interesting? Zuer, didn't you say your best friend invited you to lunch? So you ended up here, right?" Outside the door, a strange man's voice questioned. Through the slightly chipped glass, Chu Qing saw a blurry figure outside the door. Wearing a white suit, he could at least be considered presentable. It was clearly Lin Hengxian. However, after taking a brief look, Chu Qing raised an eyebrow slightly, revealing a hint of interest. The three people outside the door clearly didn't notice Chu Qing's gloomy gaze, and Ryuxu's voice followed immediately. "Honey, don't be angry. Fang Ping said Chu Qing is a bit suicidal and asked me to talk to him and help him give up on this idea completely. So that's how it is. But speaking of which, what's that pretty boy Chu Qing doing in this godforsaken place?" Lin Hengxian's voice rang out again. "He said he came to work as a doorman, but I felt sorry for him and gave him 10,000 yuan as a breakup fee, hoping he'd stop causing trouble. You really don't trust me, and you still followed me here." Hearing that Ryuxu seemed a little angry, Lin Hengxian's voice softened immediately. No way, my mom came to relieve me, so I don't need to look after the hospital anymore. My dad is still insisting on being discharged, it's really annoying. I was thinking of going out for a meal with you and seeing your best friend, but who would have thought you'd come to this awful place? At this point, Lin Hengxian turned his head and looked around, seemingly spotting a figure in the guardhouse. He peeked inside. Damn it, what was that idiot Chu Qing thinking? I always said artists aren't exactly mentally sound, coming to this godforsaken place to be a doorman. Chu Qing, dare to come out. The guardhouse door was pushed open, and Enryuxu's expression immediately became tense. As expected, Chu Qing came out holding a wad of banknotes. Is there something you need, young Master Lin? Oh ho, you pretty boy, you actually dare to come out here. What did I tell you before? Just go to some KTV or nightclub and do this kind of thing. I guarantee you'll make tens of thousands of yuan a month. Lin Hengxian smiled mockingly, looking at Chu Qing with disdain, especially at the 10,000 yuan in Chu Qing's hand. He paused, then continued. If you meet a few rich women willing to spend money on you, tens or hundreds of thousands a month wouldn't be a problem. If all else fails, I can introduce you to some. My dad knows several women in his business who are short of men but not of money at home, and even a few male bosses who are into that sort of thing. If you need it, I can introduce you to someone. Who knows, maybe our Lin family business will need your help to put in a good word for us. Ha ha ha. Chu Qing's upturned lips remained unchanged as she continued to scrutinize Lin Hengxian with great interest, seemingly oblivious to what he was saying. Fang Ping, however, couldn't hold back any longer and stepped forward, blocking Chu Qing's path. Lin Hengxian, what the hell are you saying? Lin Hengxian looked at Fang Ping coldly. What, you idiot, you want to fight me? Looking at your pathetic self, I heard you went for a job interview at Hunyu Entertainment this morning. Let me tell you, Zhao Yu from Hunyu Uncle's family is my buddy's childhood friend. You still want to work at Hunyu? Keep dreaming, but... Seeing Fang Ping's flushed face, Lin Hengxian smiled. Zhao Yu and I registered an MCN company together. Here's the deal. If you insult this pretty boy now, I'll keep the HR manager position for you with a starting salary of 200,000 RMB per year, not including bonuses. How about it? He looked at Fang Ping with arrogance. This is his most frequently used tactic. When money is involved, love, friendship, and even family ties are all worthless. He was used to the obsequious manner of these people when tempted by money. Therefore, he looked at Fang Ping expectantly. Even Chu Qing looked at his friend from behind with great interest. Only Enryuxu frowned, looking at Lin Hengxian with genuine dissatisfaction for the first time. Fang Ping's face flushed even redder, and he suddenly rushed forward, grabbing the latter by the collar. You think you're so great just because you have a few bucks. Without your father, you're nothing, damn it. After saying that, he swung his fist and smashed it towards Lin Hengxian's face. This scene was unexpected for both Lin Hengxian and Chu Qing. The former instinctively dodged. Chu Qing reached out and finally stopped Fang Ping. He remained the same, smiling as he looked at the somewhat panicked Lin Hengxian. Young Master Lin, you've finished showing off and you've found the person. All right, take the money back and leave. Seeing the wad of banknotes Chu Qing handed him, Lin Hengxian finally snapped out of his daze. He slapped the 10,000 yuan back, and just as he was about to say something, he suddenly felt a chill run through his body. For some reason, the cemetery before him seemed to dim considerably, and most importantly, an indescribable fear gripped his heart. He forced a fierce glare at Chu Qing and Fang Ping. I'm not short of money, don't bother Zuer anymore. Honey, let's go. After saying that, he deliberately took Enryuxu's arm and hurriedly walked towards the gate, getting into the extravagantly styled sports car. As he opened the car door, he glanced instinctively at the cemetery. However, that single glance sent a chill down his spine, which had been standing in the warm sunlight. He then jumped into the car and sped away. Honey, what's wrong? Enryuxu looked at the absent-minded Lin Hengxian and asked in surprise. Lin Hengxian's body seemed to be trembling at this moment. He slammed on the brakes on the road and then looked at Enryuxu beside him in a panic. Zuer, there's a ghost there. Right next to Chu Qing, a ghost whose face is obscured, only its hair is visible and it's dressed entirely in white. Seeing the fear in Lin Hengxian's eyes, a barely perceptible hint of disdain flashed in Enryuxu's eyes, but she still spoke softly. There's no such thing as ghosts in this world. Besides, it's broad daylight. Have you been getting a little neurotic lately from spending time with Dad? No, Zuer, I really didn't lie to you, Lin Hengxian explained anxiously. Just you wait, that Chu Qing won't live much longer. He actually dared to work as a security guard in this haunted place, but it's good this way, he won't be able to bother you anymore. That's fine too. Listening to Lin Hengxian's incoherent ramblings, Enryuxu remained silent. Her delicate white hands continued to gently pat Lin Hengxian's back, seemingly trying to soothe the man's fear. However, in her eyes, which Lin Hengxian couldn't see, a deep, unyielding coldness and undisguised disdain were already revealed. Chu Qing stood at the door, still smiling as she watched the roar of the engine disappear into the distance. He hadn't done anything from beginning to end. Instead, he turned his head, glanced at Fang Ping, who was still furious, and then smiled. All right, is it really necessary to get so angry? Fang Ping was taken aback and looked at Chu Qing. Chu Qing, aren't you angry that this B***** D talked to you like that? Damn it, he thinks he can make me work like a dog for that little bit of money. Doesn't he even use his brain? What can't we do to survive these days? Do you think I'll starve to death because of his pittance? Chu Qing smiled and opened the door to the guardhouse. Fang Ping looked at this guy's appearance, feeling annoyed but helpless, and walked straight in. Instead, Chu Qing didn't follow Fang Ping, but instead continued speaking towards a deserted open space not far away. Don't worry, he has something interesting on him. We'll give you a good taste of it when the time comes. Back inside, Fang Ping looked at Chu Qing suspiciously. What's the rush? What opportunity? What are we going to eat? I'm already furious. Chu Qing didn't answer, but instead glanced at the guy. Surprisingly, he was quite satisfied with the guy's reaction. Although Chu Qing rarely makes the foolish decision to test human nature, this guy seems pretty good so far. It's a bit of a pity that he died in the early stages of the ghost plague in his previous life. Thinking of this, Chu Qing threw the 10,000 yuan on the table, pulled out a few bills, and looked at Fang Ping. Fang Ping, I'll teach you a skill. Give me your ID card. What? Fang Ping was taken aback, but he still obediently did as instructed. Then he stared in disbelief as Chu Qing folded the bright red banknote in his hand into a small paper figure in a few quick movements. The paper figure had arms, hands, feet, and a head. In fact, Fang Ping was stunned when Chu Qing took out a watercolor pen to draw on it. He even felt that the origami figure was himself. Because he had already seen that Chu Qing had actually written his birth date and time on the paper figure and handed it to him. Keep this on your person. If you encounter any danger, throw it out, or even better, set it on fire. Then just come find me. Fang Ping blankly accepted the object, then glanced at the dilapidated shop that doubled as a guardhouse and a store selling incense, candles, paper figures, and paintings, staring in disbelief. Wow, you really want to make this your main job. Chu Qing ignored him and instead picked up another banknote, looking at the other person. Stop talking nonsense and follow my instructions. I have limited time, I have to go out soon. But Chu Qing, could we use a different sheet of paper? Isn't it a waste to use money to fold paper? Fang Ping felt a little regretful and his eyes looked somewhat strange. He was now considering whether or not to call a mental hospital. Chu Qing didn't even raise his head. You don't need to worry too much about these things, and you don't need to worry about what Lin Hengxian just said either. Just remember, what he relies on, and even he himself, means absolutely nothing to me except for his identity as a human being. Fang Ping has quite a bit of talent. Half an hour later, under Chu Qing's guidance, they had folded a fairly decent paper figure. Chu Qing nodded in satisfaction. All right, get familiar with it. For the next few days at home, don't do anything but fold these things. Oh, and send me in Ryuxu's WeChat later. Looking at the huge pile of banknotes and paper figures in his hand, Fang Ping finally couldn't resist. Kingzi, are you really all right? You saw that woman in Ryuxu, she's not worth it. Seeing Fang Ping's worried expression, Chu Qing smiled and said, What are you thinking? I'm just returning the money to her. Oh, okay then. But seriously, what's the point of folding all this stuff? Are we going to make it big and monopolize the funeral market in Los Angeles? Fang Ping said, squeezing the paper figure in his hand with a pained expression. Chu Qing thought for a moment, then put his arm around the latter's shoulder and whispered in an extremely sinister tone, This thing can exorcise ghosts. Lin Hengxian is possessed by a ghost, and I suspect his whole family is possessed by ghosts. After saying that, Chu Qing took the lead and walked out of the guardhouse, leaving Fang Ping alone. Looking at the gloomy room, Fang Ping shuddered. Watching Chu Qing's departing figure and with the mindset of better safe than sorry, he still put the paper figure into his arms, then hurriedly ran after it, shouting as he ran, Kingzi, I know a good mental hospital. Do you want me to contact them for you? Roll. After watching Fang Ping get into a taxi and leave, Chu Qing also got into another taxi that she had called to go home. Before getting his hands on the tomb ghost that Ding Zai had lamented countless times, he really needed to find out what the Lin family was all about. He had 1,000 ways to get rid of Lin Hengxian, and there were also ways to do it without causing trouble. It was simple: make him appear on the video, in the surveillance footage, and let the faceless ghost kill him. The reason for sparing his life was because the yin energy emanating from Lin Hengxian is even more concentrated than the residual yin energy in the Beishan cemetery. Most importantly, Chu Qing smelled a familiar scent on it. A familiar scent, which even his years of composure had made it difficult for him to control himself, forced him to suppress the turmoil within him with a smile. It smelled like oxidized metal. Commonly known as the smell of money, and Ryuksu was unaffected, but Lin Hengshin's scent was extremely strong. In my previous life, there was a special being who possessed something special. Regardless of the item itself, the being who wields it is far more famous than the blood-eyed dragon lord. In terms of strength, it's hard to say who is stronger. However, the blood-eyed dragon lord only reigns supreme in the dragon kingdom. He is a true materialized overlord of a local ghost god. But that thing can almost be said to enjoy a great reputation throughout the entire world. The scent emanating from Lin Hengshin came from a treasure in the possession of that being. But this thing actually originated in Los Angels. No, maybe it's just one piece of the puzzle, or maybe I'm just imagining things, but no matter what, he had to find out. Thinking of this, a glint appeared in Chu Qing's eyes. Sitting in the taxi, he sent a friend request to Ryuksu. About 10 minutes later, the friend request was finally accepted. And Ryuksu didn't post anything, only a red heart emoji, as if everything was understood without being said. August 31st, 1:12 p.m. Liucheng Second People's Hospital. In the expensive single hospital room, several nurses and 2 doctors were holding an elderly figure firmly in place. He was a middle-aged man who wasn't actually that old. In fact, his hair was only graying at the temples, and he looked to be only in his 50s. However, the madness on his face added an indescribable air of insanity and premature aging. My money, my money. Someone's trying to steal my money. God of wealth, where is my God of wealth? Quickly, please invite the God of wealth here. Quickly, please invite the God of wealth here. Only with the God of wealth around can no one touch my money. My money is all mine. The screams made him sound nothing like a wealthy and influential businessman from Los Angels. Instead, he seemed like a complete madman or even a mentally unstable miser granted. A woman standing nearby had a bitter expression on her face, but she and all the other medical staff held onto Lin Yuncheng tightly. Soon, the door to the hospital's VIP ward was pushed open, and Lin Hengshin, who hadn't even had a bite to eat, rushed back. Looking at his father, who seemed like a controlled zombie, he asked, "Dad's had another episode." Although frustrated by her son's inappropriate choice of words, the woman nodded, her face full of worry. Where's Xiaoxu? As the mother-in-law, she was extremely satisfied with this daughter-in-law. Although her family wasn't well off, she was very filial and loved her son dearly. Most importantly, she was very ambitious, loved learning, and was extremely beautiful without attracting unwanted attention. She'd only ever had one boyfriend in her entire life. So despite the fact that they were not a good match, she still agreed to this daughter-in-law. Lin Hengshin then said, "Mom, you called me and said Dad's gone crazy wanting that thing again. I thought this couldn't go on, so I'll have Zuer go home and get it for us." The woman glared at her. "What were you thinking? Your dad is like this because of that thing. If you ask me, that thing should have been smashed and thrown away immediately. How could you still let?" Before she could finish speaking, Lin Yuncheng suddenly broke free from his restraints and grabbed the woman by the neck with both hands. "You're trying to take my money. You're trying to rob me. I'll strangle you. I'll strangle you." Within seconds, the woman's face turned bright red. Fortunately, the medical staff beside her reacted quickly and, after restraining her again, used a rope to firmly tie her to the hospital bed. Even so, Lin Yuncheng's eyes were still bloodshot as he stared at his wife, with whom he had shared more than 20 years of life. It was as if he wasn't the person beside her pillow, but her father's killer. The woman finally couldn't hold back anymore and collapsed onto the bed, wailing loudly. Only Lin Hengshin frowned, feeling both annoyed and somewhat impatient by the noise. He could only hope that Ryuksu would be faster. "Hurry up and bring that thing over. Let those 2 old fogies have some peace and quiet." However, at this very moment, beside Ryuksu, on whom Lin Hengshin had placed high hopes, stood a strange man he had never expected. Together with his beloved woman, they entered their villa garden in the car he had bought for her. The incident began a week ago when Lin Hengshin returned home late at night and saw his father, Lin Yuncheng, lying on the incense and candle holder in the living room, muttering to himself while holding that thing. He kept saying things like, "It's his money, someone's trying to steal it, and he needs the protection of the God of wealth." Lin Hengshin and his mother both thought his father had gone mad. Over the next few days, his symptoms worsened. As Ryuksu spoke, she and Chu Qing got out of the driver's seat of her white BMW 530. Chu Qing's expression was extremely calm, but the slight tremor in the corner of his eye was enough for those who knew him well to discover the huge turmoil in his heart through this small change. After stepping into this detached villa garden worth 8 figures in Lowe's Angels, Chu Ching was now 100% certain. Confirmed his previous guess was correct. That smell, that familiar, gloomy scent with a peculiar metallic odor, that captivating aroma that once inhaled is unforgettable for a lifetime. They had already entered the main hall of the villa. His ex-girlfriend, however, showed no awareness whatsoever that she had already married another man. Seemingly aware that the Lin family's nanny was on leave, she acted like a couple deeply in love, affectionately trying to put her arm around Chu Ching's. "I risked my life to bring you here, Brother Ching. How are you going to repay me?" Chu Ching glanced at his ex-girlfriend, whose beautiful face was full of self-satisfaction and whose snow-white chin was raised. That woman is indeed a despicable person. However, they do have a set of methods. Otherwise, it wouldn't be easy for Chu Ching to get in and figure things out without any trouble. He ignored Ryuxu's solicitousness. Every minute before the arrival of the terrifying era was incredibly precious, and his plans were slightly altered by the appearance of this thing. Where now would anyone have the leisure and inclination to explore the mysteries of human emotions with her? His gaze swept across the area, and soon it locked onto something. He slowly walked over to it. Having personally encountered countless strange phenomena, even without activating his blood eyes or possessing any yin-related abilities, he could still sense the concentration of yin energy. At this very moment, the yin energy in the living room of this villa was no less intense than that of Beishan's cemetery, and perhaps even more concentrated and intense due to its smaller size. No wonder Lin Hengshan had dark circles under his eyes. He looked like he was destined to die young. The source of this yin energy lies here. He didn't rush to use the blood eye. Judging from Ryuxu's reaction, this thing had been sitting there for at least half a month. And out of all the people in the Lin family, only Lin Hengshan's father was affected. Moreover, according to Ryuxu, he didn't seem to be in immediate danger of dying, which undoubtedly indicates that the killing rules of this thing are not so terrifyingly effective. This is a statue of the god of wealth. It was about the height of a human head and appeared to be cast in bronze. However, due to its age, the original bronze-colored paint had oxidized and turned black, making it look extremely eerie in the unlit and curtained living room. It's worth mentioning that this bronze god of wealth is holding a small black copper coin in his hand. It seems that it was cast into this shape during the initial melting and casting process, fitting together perfectly. Chu Ching's gaze remained fixed on the god of wealth and the black copper coin in his hand without moving an inch, and Ryuxu, standing to the side, continued to chatter on and on. "Brother Ching, you have no idea, right after we left Beishan's cemetery, that good-for-nothing Lin Hengshan actually said he saw a ghost next to you. He even said you might die soon, but it's him who's going to die. He's such a grown man and he's still afraid of ghosts. It's hilarious. Besides having a good father, how can he compare to you, Brother Ching?" Just then Chu Ching finally spoke. "He's right." And Ryuxu was taken aback by Chu Ching's interruption, and Chu Ching's words left her completely bewildered. Chu Ching's gaze remained unchanged, still fixed on the bronze statue above, and he repeated, "He's right." And Ryuxu opened her mouth but didn't know what to say for a moment. After more than 10 seconds, she finally said, "Brother Ching, what are you saying? How could you possibly want to?" Chu Ching calmly continued to interrupt. "That's not what I meant. I meant he's right. Ghosts really do exist." "What?" And Ryuxu found it utterly ridiculous at that moment. The sunlight outside the window was obscured by clouds, and in an instant, the living room, which was already dimly lit because the curtains were drawn, became deep and quiet. Chu Ching, however, paid no attention. Instead, he slowly pointed upwards and continued calmly, "Look there." And Ryuxu looked up. The statue of the god of wealth was hidden in the shadows, appearing eerie and sinister from this angle. For some reason, after looking at it, she felt a chill run through her body and goosebumps suddenly rose on her skin. Chu Ching's voice also rang in my ears. "There's one lying up there. Look, it's watching us, this cheating couple." Silence. The entire villa was shrouded in darkness, which shouldn't have been there, and nothing but silence. 5 seconds later, a crisp thump sound rang out. The woman next to me was swallowing a little too loudly. However, it was clear that neither Chu Ching nor Ryuxu would care about such a trivial matter at this moment. Chu Ching could already feel the woman beside him trembling, and Ryuxu's fingers, gripping Chu Ching's sleeve, turned pale, and she involuntarily trembled, shaking his clothes. Chu Ching didn't care at all. In fact, she even stood in front of him, standing with the god of wealth statue hidden in the darkness. They stopped in Ryuxu. This deeply moved the ex-girlfriend who had misunderstood the situation, although she still couldn't believe that ghosts really existed. If Ryuxu were a little bolder at this moment, she could find out the answer simply by standing next to Chu Ching. Because, without anyone noticing, Chu Qing's pupils had turned a deep crimson. He looked at the statue of the god of wealth, hidden in the darkness, with a calm and indifferent expression. There's no doubt about the blood-eyed dragon lord's abilities. At this stage, probably no living being can withstand the watchful gaze of someone with eyes that can see everything. The god of wealth rank, 9th grade category, entire spectacle lifespan in the underworld, 3 years, 2 months, and 10 days. Wealth can communicate with the god's rules. Living beings can worship this statue of the god of wealth and pray for wealth. Afterwards, the living being will receive the blessing of yin wealth. While in this state, every time a portion of money is received, the living being's fervent dependence on the god of wealth will increase, and their willpower will decrease. When one's wealth is enhanced by the extreme yin wealth state, exceeding a certain amount will trigger a killing rule, absorbing all the wealth of living beings. This rule allows for a significant increase in the amount of lifespan absorbed through killing. Greed ability, passive effect. Causes all living beings to become increasingly greedy upon seeing this true form. Entity status, unable to move freely, lifespan consumption is halved daily. Promotion requirements, unknown. Note, this thing is pretty good and the copper coin in his hand is even better. So human, if it weren't for me, wouldn't you have missed out on a treasure? Ignoring the blood-eyed demon's narcissism beneath its seemingly beady eyes, Chu Qing's calm gaze showed no regard for this yin god of wealth. Yin Cation, god of wealth. What kind of rotten fish and shrimp, a mere 9th-rank monster, dares to claim the title of a true god? That is the early stage of the supernatural phenomenon. If it were in the previous era, a powerful ghost tamer would have easily wiped out a great supernatural being he passed by. This thing is still in its infancy and is just instinctive. Ignorance is no excuse. Chu Qing's blood-red gaze followed the blood-eyed demon's hint and fell upon the jet-black copper coin in its hand. Clearly, compared to this yin wealth god, this copper coin is indeed more important. Black copper coin, rank, 9th grade. Category, one of the funerary artifact puzzle pieces, size unknown and cannot be determined. Coinage ability, holding this copper coin grants 1 day's worth of underworld money daily. Who doesn't love money? Curse, no curse required, any rank 7 being can use this. Note, humans, hurry up and get this, don't waste our money, this is our money. Chu Qing smiled. This was the most genuine smile he had shown since his rebirth. This black copper coin is truly remarkable. 1 day's worth of ghost money for the deceased's lifespan. If a ghost master obtains it early on, it provides a safety net, and they don't need to worry too much about the depletion of their lifespan. Not to mention, this thing isn't cursed. In other words, it is a precious funerary object that can be used freely without any consequences. The use of funerary objects is considered to be cursed. The strength of a curse determines the value of funerary objects. The lower the requirements for using the curse, the higher the value of the funerary object. However, what truly brought Chu Qing such joy was not this. Rather, it was because he could finally be certain. This copper coin is a fragment of a puzzle from my memory of that thing, the entire world, the entire terrifying world of the blue planet. First-rank ghost kings and fierce gods are not numerous, but there are some. However, let alone first-grade funerary artifacts, even those within the 3rd grade are inconceivable treasures. In his previous life, Chu Qing did have one, which was one of the reasons he became the king of Chujiang. However, compared to the complete version of this thing, it's nothing compared to the real thing, and its reputation in the horror world is also far inferior. Of course, the landlady who held the complete version of this item, as a renowned figure throughout the entire terrifying world of Blue Star, was naturally quite different from him. However, Chu Qing never expected that a fragment of this thing would actually appear in Luo City. It seems there's a great chance I'll have a good interaction with the boss lady of the Heizama world in the future. Thinking of this, Chu Qing's upturned lips became even more radiant. He stretched out his hand, and Ryuxu noticed Chu Qing's unusual movement and peeked out. She saw Chu Qing's hand outstretched, his pale and excessively long fingers actually pinching the black copper coin in the hand of the god of wealth statue. What is he going to do? And Ryuxu quickly figured out what Chu Qing was going to do, and she tugged at him. Then the strength visibly increased. Even with the veins bulging on his palm, neither the copper coin nor the statue remained completely still, and Ryuxu, standing behind Chu Qing, was dumbfounded. Robbing money, trying to steal money from the god of wealth. No, Chu Qing just said there's a ghost lying on top of it. Does that mean Chu Qing is currently robbing a ghost for money? Are you crazy? Most importantly, judging from this god of wealth, this ghostly god of wealth, doesn't seem to want to let go either. Soon, Chu Qing relaxed his grip. He seemed to exhale, adjusting his breathing, which had become slightly disordered due to the excessive force he had used. The next moment, Chu Qing reached out his hand, signaling in Ryuxu to stay back. She did as he said, but dared not leave Chu Qing's side by more than 2 steps. Chu Qing calmly looked at Yin Keishan with her blood-red eyes and said softly, "You lowly monster who devours the lives and fortunes of living beings, yet you dare to exist in the world in the name of a righteous God. I'm giving you a chance, but do you still not know your own limitations?" Clearly, given the strangeness of the 9th rank, Chu Qing didn't expect the other party to understand the weight of those words. Arguing with these mindless beasts is pointless. The main point is to attract their attention. Blood-red pupils were firmly locked onto the Yin god of wealth, whose pitch-black eyes in the darkness locked onto it instantly. At this moment, that feeling of being connected to the faceless demon's aura reappeared. So facing the object's gaze and amidst Ryuxu's bewildered look, Chu Qing slowly bowed. "God of wealth, then bless me with abundant wealth. The wealth I desire is not the worthless paper that humans use, you understand now, right?" After saying that, he actually bowed directly to the thing above. Then, to Ryuxu's astonishment, the Yin god of wealth statue, which had been incredibly dark and sinister just moments before, began to sway on its own. Then, with a thud, he actually fell right onto the incense burner. The bronze statue seemed to be kneeling directly on the incense table, utterly unable to accept Chu Qing's bow. The black copper coin that Chu Qing had struggled to pull off with all his might clattered to the ground in front of him. He picked it up. It was icy cold to the touch. "You're quite sensible, so I'll spare your life. You can come to my house to ward off evil spirits." Thump. The statue rolled and another voice came, as if in response to say yes. 20 years have passed since the Age of Terror began. What is the most powerful and ferocious deity ghost? As Chu Qing returned to the cemetery alone in a taxi, this interesting question came to mind again. In later generations, many powerful figures left comments on this most famous post in forums formed by countless demon tamers. This post features powerful spirits and deities from all over the world, each possessing various rules and abilities. There is a blood-eyed dragon king who rules over the land of the Dragon Kingdom. Bloody Mary, the nightmare of every man on the entire planet Earth. The proprietress of the neutral world of Hazama, Girl of the Night, the Hungry, Friday the Curse, Midnight Cinema, the Joker. Among them, some are of extremely high rank, some have bizarre rules, and some have astonishing battle records. However, among them, there is one extremely special existence. It is one of the most unique and eerie ghost stories. It was once a profound nightmare for ordinary people. It was once a trial that ambitious and courageous people dreamed of. 20 years after the Age of Terror on Earth, there are many, many names. In Daxia, some initially called it the Death Apartment, the Underworld Hotel. On Earth, some later called it Little Hell, Crimson City. Legend has it that it originally consisted of just one room. Anyone who enters this room will trigger a special curse. The curse is simple. He wanted the person who entered the room to go somewhere and complete their task. This task is uncertain. Perhaps it is so difficult that a mortal can use the rules to make the supernatural kill itself. Perhaps it's about bringing the ghost back to it. Or perhaps it's as simple as just walking around there and coming back. Without exception, the only consequence of failing to complete the mission is death. With punishment comes reward. As long as the task is completed, you can obtain so-called hell points from it. These points can be redeemed for a lot of things. It's said they can even be anything. This is what makes it so exciting for countless demon slayers. However, during those 2 decades of terror, it seemed that only ordinary humans who had not yet become demon slayers could enter it. This is undoubtedly the most regrettable thing. This also led to many demon hunters not taking the news of the Death Apartment seriously after it spread. Then, something happened that shook the world's demon hunters. In the southeast of the Dragon Kingdom, there lived a first-rank ghost tamer known as the Buddha King. They discovered the existence of the Death Apartment and, ignoring its rejections and warnings, used a special method to enter the apartment on their own initiative. 3 days passed without any incident. The three-faced Buddha, the ghostly entity that symbolized the Buddha King's contract, was released from the contract and reappeared in the world. Since then, in Southeast Asia, apart from the emergence of a ferocious ghost, the three-faced Buddha, the first-rank ghost master, the Buddha King, seems to have never appeared in the world. They silently eliminated a first-rank ghost master. At the same time, it also left behind the other party's natal ghost, the Death Apartment, which from that moment on became one of the special entities that absolutely could not be provoked. This is the legend of the Death Apartment, a story known to all demon slayers in the previous life. Beep beep. The taxi horn interrupted Chu Qing's thoughts. After glancing at the taxi driver, who seemed somewhat panicked at arriving in this godforsaken place, Chu Qing paid the fare, got out of the car, and returned to the Beishan cemetery, which now belonged entirely to him. He took out the key, opened the door, and then his eyes instantly turned incredibly bloodshot as he waved. The faceless ghost, hidden in the darkness, quickly came up behind Chu Qing and followed him into the guardhouse. Playing with the icy-cold copper coin in his hand, Chu Qing once again embarked on a drastic act, picking up a fruit knife and cutting his finger. He placed drops of blood into the bowl. Before long, the crimson liquid filled about half a bowl. Chu Qing thought for a moment, then added some of the remaining cinnabar and mineral water from the shop. He stirred it in the bowl with his finger, then used his finger as a brush tip to test it. He nodded in satisfaction, then looked at the helpless, faceless ghost with his scarlet eyes. He simply took out 2 bowls. Then he inserted the 2 bowls into the faceless demon's body and began to use them to transfer things. The faceless ghost tried to dodge, but was firmly locked onto by Chu Qing's blood-red eyes and dared not move. Finally, after mixing a large amount of yin energy into this bowl of blood, cinnabar, and water pigment, Chu Qing once again used his finger as a brush to begin writing on the glass door of the guardhouse. Name: Yin Cation, God of Wealth, rank, 9th grade. In his previous life, Ding Zai had also told him about the death apartment, in addition to the well-known legend of the death apartment. His words back then were something Chu Qing had never expected. Ding Zai said he almost managed to control the death apartment from the very beginning. That's right, this King Ding Zai of Biancheng uttered words that would have been considered boastful by anyone else who heard them. However, Chu Qing knew that, based on his understanding of Ding Zai, even when drunk, Ding Zai was not the type to boast. Although this sounds really impossible, the reason is simple, as Ding Zai said back then. The death apartment was summoned or perhaps even created by him by chance. It's unbelievable, but that guy back then spoke with absolute certainty. Most importantly, to increase credibility, this guy had told him about the specific steps and processes, as well as the subsequent reasoning. Ding Zai was originally a tomb keeper. After becoming a gravedigger, this guy simply created a small grave on his own family's land. When he first became the gravedigger, he had a habit. He would write down all the strange news, locations, death tolls, and possible speculations he gathered from various sources on the only large iron gate of his small, covered grave. Prepare and plan for the subsequent search. Just like Chu Qing at this very moment, his mind was racing, but his hands didn't stop moving. The next line of blood-red characters quickly appeared. Location: Los Angeles Second People's Hospital. Ding Zai's potential and courage, which enabled him to become a first-rank Yin official in the future Dragon Kingdom, were already evident from the very beginning of the Terror's arrival. Therefore, the chances of returning victorious after each expedition are extremely high. Each time he would hang the controlled monster on the door, or have his tomb ghost absorb it or bury it in his tomb. One day later, Ding Zai suddenly noticed some changes in the words he had written on the iron gate. He didn't pay much attention at first, but then one day he suddenly discovered that the words on the iron gate were moving on their own. Then, a strange, completely new and undiscovered trace appeared. He was skeptical at first, but he actually went to that location and found that there really was such a strange creature there. However, when Ding Zai returned to his tomb, he discovered that the strange writing on the iron gate had disappeared. This was because he had failed to complete the task of the blood-written words. So even the tomb spirits guarding the mausoleum couldn't figure out how the thing disappeared. After that, the name Death Apartment gradually spread throughout Daxia and the world. Ding Zai had said these things to Chu Qing more than once. He expressed his regret and lamentation more than once, if it weren't for the fact that he hadn't thought of it at the beginning. And that he already had a tomb spirit under his control, and knew the speed at which the Death Apartment was improving, he would have found a way to subdue it no matter what, even if it meant paying a huge price. Chu Qing paused slightly as she wrote, and a smile involuntarily appeared on her face. Objective: to bring the true form of the Yin God of Wealth back to this location from the Second People's Hospital of Los Angeles. Simultaneously, the entire Lin family of 3, who were corrupted by the Yin God of Wealth, will die suddenly. Ding Zai, who rose from the lowly 9th-rank position of Tomb Keeper to become the King of Biancheng, is a character who ultimately achieved greatness. Even he believed that the original form of that Death Apartment, that gate to death, was arguably the best choice for the Tomb Keeper as a grave ghost. He had talked to Chu Qing more than once about what would have happened if he had started as a 9th-rank Yin official, the Tomb Ghost, at the Death Apartment. It can be said that the reason why Chu Qing, who was reborn, chose the Tomb Keeper as his 9th-rank Yin position was largely because of this special Tomb Ghost. As the best friend of this King Biancheng in his previous life, How could Chu Qing not help his good brother fulfill this wish? Thinking of this, Chu Qing dipped the last bit of blood-red paint from the bottom of the bowl onto the glass of the doorway, leaving the final finishing touches. Commentary. Wealth can reach the heavens and control the earth. Money can summon ghosts and exorcise gods. Edict of King Chu Qing of Chujiang. August 31, 4:17 p.m., 55 hours and 43 minutes remaining until the full onset of the terror resurgence. Los Angeles Second People's Hospital, and Ryuxu had never been this careful before. In fact, when Ryuxu and Chu Qing left the Lin family villa, it was only around 2 o'clock, but the journey took Ryuxu more than 2 hours. It wasn't a traffic jam, but that thing I put in the back seat. Before this afternoon, she absolutely did not believe in ghosts. But after what happened at the Lin family villa that afternoon, she now knew that the god of wealth placed in the back seat was a genuine, eerie object. Who could drive like that without a care in the world? She's lost count of how many tickets she's received along the way. The thought of a ghost watching her from behind sent chills down in Ryuxu's spine. Who knows how many times she cursed Chu Qing in her heart along the way. If it weren't for the fact that the thing behind her had treated Chu Qing with such an attitude, that afternoon she would have cursed it out. Is this guy even human? Now it seems like it might not be so. After scaring her, he just took a taxi and left, leaving her, a girl, to come here alone with this monster. Of course, that's what she thought in her heart, but outwardly she repeatedly muttered to herself, "I'm Chu Qing's woman. If you're going to cause trouble for the Lin family, don't come after me." It has to be said that even though that man treated her like an animal, and Ryuxu realized at this point that only he could give her a sense of security. Even if it's just a name. So later, after carrying this object to the ward, and Ryuxu found that the fear in her heart had unknowingly disappeared without a trace. "Zuer, you've finally arrived. Why didn't you answer my call?" Lin Hengshan quickly stepped forward and took the black statue of the god of wealth, which was about 30 centimeters tall. He clearly hadn't noticed the change in the black statue of the god of wealth, and was complaining that Ryuxu's arrival was a little late, causing him to be tormented by the noise of the two old geezers for more than 2 hours. He reached out and accepted the heavy bronze statue of the god of wealth. He hurriedly walked towards his father, Lin Yuancheng, and as expected, ever since Ryuxu entered, Lin Yuancheng's gaze had not left the statue of the god of wealth. "God of wealth, mine. My money, Dad, the god of wealth has arrived. Don't worry, with the god of wealth around, our family's money won't be lacking. Just cooperate and obediently see the doctor and take your medicine." Lin Hengshan quickly handed over the statue of the god of wealth. Lin Yuancheng held the statue of the god of wealth tightly in his arms. Its wide-open eyes finally closed slowly, which made everyone breathe a sigh of relief. Lin Hengshan then said, "I told you bringing this to Dad would have been fine." After things calmed down, getting the doctor to treat him properly is better than anything else. Seeing that her husband had calmed down, the woman breathed a sigh of relief, nodded, and looking at her husband with his eyes closed, she then said, "In that case, let your dad get some sleep. Tell the medical staff he hasn't eaten all day and wants to go out and get something to eat." The three nodded in unison and walked out of the hospital. After grabbing a quick bite at a nearby restaurant, it was already pitch black when I came out. However, just as the three returned to the entrance of the Second People's Hospital, a taxi slowly pulled up in front of it. After the three people glanced at each other, two of them stopped in their tracks simultaneously. Lin Hengshan and Ryuxu reacted very differently. The former frowned, while the latter showed a mixture of surprise and panic. However, neither of them spoke, silently watching Chu Qing get out of the taxi. That's right, it was Chu Qing who arrived. "Chu Qing, what are you doing here?" Lin Hengshan asked coldly. This also made Chu Qing turn her head to look at the three people in front of the door, and the corners of her mouth once again turned up in that arc that Lin Hengshan was so familiar with and hated. Faced with this young Master Lin's question, Chu Qing answered directly, "I've come to collect something from me. Young Master Lin is here too. Do you have something here?" Lin Hengshan glanced at the gate of the second hospital, somewhat bewildered. However, it was clear that after what happened at noon today, young Master Lin was no longer in the mood to chat idly with Chu Qing, especially with his family around. He walked casually into the hospital lobby and arrived at the elevator. Unfortunately, that annoying guy behind me also followed me into the elevator. Lin Hengshan made no attempt to hide his disgust. The woman standing nearby also noticed her son's expression. She gave this simply dressed, but reasonably good-looking young man with an extraordinary air about him a strange and disdainful look. As a genuine upper-class member of the Luo family, she didn't know what relationship Chu Qing had with her son. but it was clear that, judging from the current situation, she didn't need to give him any special treatment. However, just as she was about to ask, several nurses rushed into the elevator. Upon seeing the four people in the elevator, one of them, who was clearly older, bowed slightly. "Sir and madam, we need to go to the 8th floor inpatient ward urgently. Could you please wait a moment?" The three people besides Chu Qing were taken aback. Lin Hengxian spoke. "We're going to the 8th floor too, what's wrong?" The 8th floor houses private wards in the second hospital. Those who can stay there are clearly either wealthy or powerful. However, the nurses' expressions clearly changed, but they shook their heads. "It's all right, since that's the case, let's go up together." Lin Tianheng and the woman exchanged a glance, seemingly both seeing the worry in each other's eyes. Only Chu Qing's smile remained unchanged. "We've arrived at the 8th floor." Near the elevator, a doctor asked anxiously, "Has the spare key for Ward 11 arrived? Hurry, Ward 11. Upon hearing this number, Lin Hengxian's face visibly paled. He disregarded his mother behind him and hurriedly followed. "Doctor, what happened in room 11? The doctor clearly recognized Lin Tianheng. Unfortunately, at this moment, the doctor showed no intention of speaking to him. Beads of sweat on his forehead were soaked through, even the edges of his mask. Holding the spare key, I arrived at the door of ward number 11. And Ryuxu and the woman also quickly followed. Only Chu Qing walked over slowly, and then he heard the piercing screams coming from ahead. In just a few minutes. The woman who had just been so arrogant screamed and fainted, while the young master who had just been so domineering turned pale and collapsed to the ground. The tense doctor breathed a sigh of relief. His anxiety finally subsided. Only in Ryuxu, her face pale, turned around and looked at her ex-boyfriend who was slowly walking towards her from behind. Chu Qing. Her expression was complex, tinged with an indescribable fear. She suddenly had the illusion that the King of Hell had come to take her away. Chu Qing ignored her gaze and strolled slowly until she finally arrived at the door of ward number 11. In the wide-open ward, Lin Yuancheng lay on the snow-white hospital bed, a bronze statue of the god of wealth placed in his arms, facing the doorway. The bronze statue of the god of wealth seemed to be smiling at everyone. On the snow-white hospital bed, bright red banknotes were scattered everywhere on the bed, on the blankets, and on the floor. At this moment, this place doesn't feel like a hospital ward, but rather like a tomb built with red banknotes. In the very center of the grave, Lin Yuancheng sat up, leaning back on the hospital bed. His eyes were dark red from suffocation. He opened his mouth wide, and his mouth was stuffed full of bright red banknotes, like a blooming rose, unconscious amidst the noise, panic, and cries. At this moment, the ward was briefly silent, yet bustling with noise, much like a marketplace. This ruined Chu Qing's mood, which was perfectly suited to appreciating this funeral scene, which was like a work of art. The doctor quickly went over, checked Lin Yuancheng's eyelids, and instructed the nurse to place the unconscious woman on the bed next to him. The doctor stood up and shook his head. "The patient committed suicide by swallowing money, causing suffocation. We never expected the patient to have suicidal tendencies. Please accept our condolences." "Please accept my condolences, Maya ***. Is this how your second hospital treats its patients?" "My father's mental state was already bad, and you..." Lin Hengxian roared in anger. "Mr. Lin, please don't get agitated. After you left, Mr. Lin locked the door from the inside. We don't know what happened. When we asked, Mr. Lin did speak." However, just 10 minutes later, after the nurse had stopped moving during the inspection, the doctor looked troubled. Clearly, he hadn't expected this either. However, Lin Hengxian could not possibly agree to this. His father was lying in bed. However, just as Lin Hengxian was about to press further, the nurse beside him quickly said, "Dr. Zhang, Ms. Sun's condition is not good." Ms. Sun is clearly Lin Hengxian's mother. Lin Hengxian immediately turned his head away. The doctor stepped forward, opened his pupils, and quickly said, "Oh no, the patient has an acute cerebral hemorrhage. Get him to the emergency room immediately." At this point, Lin Hengxian obviously couldn't continue causing trouble. At noon, the once spirited young Master Lin was now completely dejected, his eyes filled with utter confusion. However, at this moment, something happened that made him even angrier. Outside the ward, behind the busy nurses, the figure of his fiancée, who should have been there, had vanished. Instead, she had turned and left with that damned guy. What is she going to do? Lin Hengxian felt a surge of inexplicable anger rising within him. Then, almost without thinking, he quietly followed them. Now her father has suddenly committed suicide, her mother's fate is unknown, and this woman is even flirting with that guy who came here for some unknown reason. Sure enough, the two quietly walked to the emergency exit on the side. Lin Hengxian could no longer hold back. He pushed open the emergency exit door and chased after it with a few quick hurried steps. And Ryuxu, what are you doing? However, after passing the dimly lit corner, Lin Hengxian discovered that the two figures were standing there. Most importantly, neither of them showed any sign of panic. In particular, their girlfriend, or rather their fiancé, had only a hint of guilt and composure in her beautiful eyes. Chu Qing looked at the young master again with great interest. Then in the dim light of the emergency exit he spoke. Young Master Lin, how does it feel to lose both your father and mother in a single day? His calm voice, tinged with a hint of mockery, echoed through the emergency passage, sending chills down Lin Hengxian's spine. Lin Hengxian stared intently at Chu Qing in front of him. What the hell are you spouting? My mother's not dead yet. Chu Qing shook his head. I can tell you with absolute certainty that your aunt is going to die, although it's a bit of a shame. It's truly a pity about him. The negative influence of the yin god of wealth was most severe in this family of three. As people age, sudden shocks coupled with a body already overburdened can lead to certain death, especially with a brain hemorrhage and a body already depleted of its yin energy. His regret wasn't about the innocent death of a life, but rather the fact that neither the god of wealth nor the blood-eyed ghost could absorb any lifespan from such a death. That's all money, his money. Therefore, having already missed one, we can't afford to waste this one in front of us. Thinking of this, Chu Qing's gaze towards Lin Hengxian became more enthusiastic. Before Lin Hengxian could say anything more, Chu Qing interrupted him impatiently. All right, I didn't call you here to talk about this. Lin Hengxian was taken aback. At this moment, the man's tone seemed to have a natural and innate sense of command. At this moment, he seemed to be the real person in a superior position. However, before Lin Hengxian could even process the meaning behind Chu Qing's words, his next words sent a chill down his spine. Look, your parents passed away on this day. As their only child, you can't bear to see them lonely over there, can you? Why don't you go and keep them company? Chu Qing spoke with a smile, as if she weren't talking about that at all, but rather about where to go out for a late-night snack later. Lin Hengxian's lips twitched. He looked at Chu Qing with shock, fear, and anger. The man before me, who always wore a serene smile, seemed like a devil. Even in Ryuxu suddenly looked at Chu Qing. Chu Qing had never said that he wanted to kill Lin Hengxian, but in that instant and Ryuxu's eyes suddenly darted around. Don't come any closer. I've studied Sanda Huxia kickboxing. In this day and age, you still dare to kill someone? Lin Hengxian assumed a boxing stance. Before he could finish speaking, his body suddenly froze. Because at this moment, without realizing it, he suddenly noticed that the man in front of him, in this dimly lit emergency passage, had eyes that had turned blood red. His whole body was trembling. He wanted to run away, but for some reason it was as if the blood in his legs had stopped circulating. He wanted to run, but no matter what he did, he couldn't move an inch. However, just then, when he truly thought he was about to die, Chu Qing's voice suddenly rang out again in the dimly lit emergency passage. Tusk, this is a bit boring and Ryuxu. Just then, Lin Hengxian remembered that his fiancée was still standing nearby. Seemingly responding to Chu Qing's call, and Ryuxu answered, and then Chu Qing continued with a smile. All right, I'll give you face. You tell me, do you want to spare your dearest fiancé's life? Think it over carefully before you speak. Your beloved's fate is entirely in your hands. And Ryuxu's body suddenly stiffened as she looked at Chu Qing, whose blood-red eyes had somehow turned to her. And Lin Hengxian, whose face was filled with fear and hope, her red lips pursed. Lin Hengxian swallowed hard, looking at Ryuxu. He believed in Ryuxu. Even now, that remained true. From the moment he first met Ryuxu, he believed that she was the partner he had been searching for the rest of his life. She was beautiful, kind, loved animals, and was ambitious. She started at her family's company as a regular salesperson, yet she landed many big deals that even sales managers couldn't. In just a few months, he decided that the girl in front of him was the love of his life. For this, he did not hesitate to defy his parents' orders and secretly registered their marriage. The deed was done. Therefore, he believed that he loved the woman in front of him so deeply, and that Ryuxu must love him just as deeply. It's all because of Chu Qing. Once we're out of danger, no matter what, no matter the cost, even if it means hiring an assassin at an exorbitant price, we'll kill him. Cut the weeds and eliminate the roots. Amidst his expectant gaze, Ryuxu let out a long breath, glanced at Chu Qing, and then slowly retreated. This small action seems to have already made a choice and provided an answer. This delighted Lin Hengxian and made Chu Qing proud. However, the change came very quickly. Ryuxu stopped in her tracks and picked up the fire extinguisher beside her. Under the dim emergency exit lights, the fire extinguisher glowed bright red. It looked as if it had been soaked in fresh blood. The woman approached the stunned Lin Hengxian. Two streams of tears flowed down her face, ruining her exquisite makeup. Even a little snot was running down her nose, showing how heartbroken she was. However, it was this very sorrowful face that opened its mouth to Lin Hengshan, whose face had slowly turned ashen. Hengshan, we've already registered our marriage. After you and your parents all die, your family's inheritance will all be mine. That's too much money. Even if I didn't have to run the business, selling all the shares would be enough for me to live on for several lifetimes. Hengshan, I'm so sorry, so very sorry, but it's just too much. There's just too much money. I don't want to share so much money with someone I don't love. As she muttered to herself, she finally picked up the half-meter-tall fire extinguisher and smashed it at Lin Hengshan. Bang. The voice was deep yet clear. Chu Qing leaned against the wall, watching the dramatic scene unfold, a spectacle dozens of times more intense than the one that had just taken place in the hospital room, and couldn't help but smile again. Why do humans who convert to the underworld become exorcists and control the supernatural? Because the human heart is always far more unfathomable than the unpredictable nature of adhering to rules of murder, isn't it? Jinshin Community, Los Angels. It's an old, rundown apartment in the Old Town area. Meanwhile, because a processing plant opened nearby, most residents moved away to await demolition, leaving only those who had nowhere else to live. One of them was Fang Ping. Fang Ping let out a long breath. He lay down on the bed, glanced at his slightly reddened fingers, and then at the stack of scraps of paper on the table. According to Chu Qing's standards, only a few could barely be considered complete. But it was enough to make Fang Ping feel a great sense of accomplishment. Although he himself did not know the meaning or reason for doing these things, it was purely out of trust in Chu Qing. But, thinking of this, Fang Ping touched the special paper figure in his arms. The bright red paper money figure, ugly cute in a way, combined with his own birth date and time, gave him a real feeling that this origami figure was truly like another version of himself. Who did Chu Qing learn this from? I'd never heard of this guy having this skill before. Fang Ping tucked the lifelike paper doll back into his pocket, took out his phone that he had tossed aside, and casually opened WeChat but suddenly froze. After graduating from university, classmates who weren't particularly close to begin with went their separate ways that summer, and the original class group chat was almost deserted. But when I clicked in today, those bright red 99+ numbers clearly indicated that something seemed to have happened. Fang Ping decisively clicked on it and then scrolled directly to where the topic had started. The line of words that caught Fang Ping's eye made his eyes widen, and he abruptly sat up in bed. Zhao Miao, something terrible has happened. Lin Yuancheng, the chairman of Senmu Group, committed suicide this evening at the second hospital due to mental illness. His wife died from an acute cerebral hemorrhage as a result, and his son, unable to accept this reality, jumped off a building. Liu Yunian, really. Zhao Miao, absolutely true. I accompanied my mother to her checkup today, and that young Master Lin's body was just a few dozen meters away from me. He jumped from the 8th floor, landing headfirst with a loud thud. It was a gruesome sight. Wang Qing, holy crap. I even went for a job interview at Senmu Construction today. Won't this affect my 6,000 yuan monthly salary? Mu Hong, wait a minute, the young master of the Senmu Group. His surname is Lin, is he that? Li Qingyun, that's right, our Anhui University beauty's new boyfriend. Good heavens, she never imagined that before she even entered the wealthy family, her entire family would be wiped out. Liu Yunian, if you ask me, Chu Qing and Enryuxu were such a perfect match back then, so why did they have to do this? Now look what happened. Wang Qing, what's so special about a handsome man and a beautiful woman? It should be a man of wealth and a woman of beauty now. It's a pity, though, that the campus belle of Anhui University missed such a chance to rise to the top. Zhou Lingling, a bunch of people are still gloating over this, don't you know? Ryuxu and Lin Hengshan already got their marriage certificate. Now that this has happened, do you know how much of the inheritance Ryuxu will get? Wang Qing, holy crap, we got our marriage certificate and then our whole family was wiped out. Is there some kind of conspiracy involved? The entire classmate group chat erupted into discussion. However, Fang Ping could only mechanically scroll through the chat history in the group. Apart from the first few sentences, his mind was completely elsewhere. What enormous inheritance, what conspiracy theories, he no longer cares at all. There was only one thing he cared about. That was what Chu Qing said to him at noon today before he returned from the North Mountain Cemetery. This thing can exorcise ghosts. Lin Hengshan is possessed by a ghost, and I suspect his entire family is possessed by ghosts. There's a ghost here, you won't live much longer. He suddenly grabbed the origami figure he had placed in his arms. However, at that moment, he suddenly noticed a faint red light appearing not far away outside the window. His home is on the first floor of Jinshin residential area. As an old building, it only has 6 floors at most, and there isn't even an elevator, let alone any bright or conspicuous streetlights. The faint red light outside seemed extremely jarring. He looked up, but upon seeing what he saw, Fang Ping was slightly taken aback. It turned out to be a lantern. No, it's a balloon. Fang Ping blinked, momentarily unable to discern the difference. However, those appear to be glowing balloons. They should actually be lanterns. But how did this thing get to my window? Unaware of this, Fang Ping instinctively opened the window, wanting to take a closer look at the thing. The faint red light instantly illuminated his entire body. An indescribable feeling of comfort spread throughout my body. Feeling this way, Fang Ping narrowed his eyes slightly, and he even had a kind of ethereal, blissful illusion. However, just as this feeling came over him, Fang Ping seemed to snap out of his daze and looked up. He didn't know when, but the blood-red lantern had appeared above his head, and he seemed to finally see clearly what was shining inside that blood-red lantern. That was a human head. Fang Ping was terrified. Unfortunately, it seems it's already too late. The lantern had somehow ended up on his head. Then, through the open window, they actually pulled a living person up and lifted them towards the sky. Let's take off. In front of Beishan Cemetery, it's still a taxi. The taxi driver, still looking sullen, hurriedly left this awful place after swiping the money. Chu Qing paid no attention to the exhaust fumes from the taxi driver's sudden acceleration and returned to Beishan Cemetery, holding the Yin Keishan statue in one hand. Lin Hengshan is dead. Their entire family died without incident. Chu Qing was very satisfied with the result, because his gains were visible to the naked eye. Chu Qing grade, none lifespan in the underworld, 4 months, lifespan in the living world, 3 months. Symbiotic state, lifespan is greatly reduced, allowing complete control over the blood-eyed demon. Note, the taste of yin life force is truly remarkable. It's only because that inferior human was infected by yin energy beforehand that he was able to generate this much yin life force. Let me, this great one, devour that thing in your arms. I have a feeling its taste will be far superior to that human's. That's right, in the end, Chu Qing would never allow an Ryuxu to kill Lin Hengshan. Not only would it be too troublesome, but there were also too many traces, so he couldn't be bothered to cause trouble for the inspectors. Fortunately, there are quite a few areas where the Blood-Eyed Dragon Lord's abilities can be developed. After making eye contact, Blood-Eye's ability to control blood was equivalent to controlling Lin Hengshan's actions. After confirming in Ryuxu's thoughts, he directly used his blood-eye to make Lin Hengshan jump off the 8th floor in front of everyone. This completely eliminated all the trouble. They also received a full month of yin lifespan. After finishing his business, he left in Ryuxu at the hospital to handle the aftermath, while he, carrying his true objective, returned to his kingdom. The door was reopened. The yin energy at night was much stronger than during the day. Even Chu Qing, whose current body was still that of an ordinary person, felt a slight chill. His blood-red eyes flashed and his gaze quickly swept over the area. The Beishan Cemetery was pitch black at night with not a single light visible, but that didn't obstruct his view. Meow. 2 faint green lights sounded from not far away. Chu Qing then smiled slightly and extended her hand. You little rascal, you're quite the watchman. Good for you. I'll give you something nice to eat tomorrow. Meow, the black cat seemed to understand Chu Qing's promise. Excitedly, it leaped into Chu Qing's outstretched arms, and then with another leap, it perched on his shoulder. Chu Qing didn't mind and instead let out a deep breath. Whether it's the god of wealth or anything else, nothing is as important as the door he's about to step through. The death apartment was a combination of Ding Zai's words and the bizarre rules he had summoned in advance based on his own understanding. This is the best candidate for the Gravekeeper, the Grave Spirit, and we absolutely cannot afford to lose him. With that in mind, Chu Qing went to the guardhouse and pushed open the door. The god of wealth slowly followed him inside. His bloodshot eyes swept across the room. The faceless ghost had been left on that door all along. By now, that door was probably already soaked in yin energy. With the lights on, he tossed the faceless ghost aside and fixed his gaze on the blood-red characters above the guardhouse door, which seemed to have dried out somewhat long ago. 3 minutes passed and nothing changed. He was prepared for failure. After all, Ding Zai had to repeat this action several times, if not a dozen, before he could awaken the nascent form of the death apartment. He wanted to succeed on his first try, and even with all the extra preparations he made, it was still difficult. This was a defeat that was to be expected, and he was not discouraged. However, just as Chu Qing was about to give up completely, suddenly his bloodshot eyes focused instantly. The dried, blood-red writing on the glass, as if suddenly transformed into something freshly written, began to flow slowly. Finally, it disappeared from the glass. It was as if something had sucked all the blood-written words dry. How do the supernatural come into being? No one can give a complete answer to this question. However, as a top-tier second-rank ghost master who was only half a step away from becoming a king in his previous life, Chu Qing, however, knew a little about it. The rule that gives rise to the bizarre is that there are absolutely no rules. Indeed, bizarre occurrences can happen under any circumstances. Humans, especially demon-controlling humans, either get killed and absorbed by the supernatural, or they have a chance to become supernatural themselves. In addition, there are old tools, coincidental events, even a sentence, a sound, or even things that have no physical form, such as a website. These things could even be considered eerie. The bizarre rule of birth is that there are no rules at all. However, as a top ghost tamer in his previous life, Chu Qing also knew some inside information. Although the bizarre can arise under any circumstances. However, the increased yin energy will inevitably accelerate the process. Yin energy was the most prominent characteristic of the Age of Terror. As the yin energy intensifies globally, the world's environment will undergo certain changes in the future. Therefore, the changes in the death apartment, Chu Qing still had a little bit of confidence, as long as Ding Zai hadn't been bragging to him back then. However, Chu Qing hadn't expected it to go so smoothly. The blood-red words slowly disappeared. Chu Qing's blood-red eyes also focused, staring at the extremely ordinary stainless steel and glass door. Blood eyes quickly noticed something different. The dense concentration of yin energy goes without saying. More importantly, through the observation of the blood-red eyes, a slightly unusual change appeared before their eyes. Note, humans seem to be drawn together by something. Damn it, I can't even see it. That's right, even with bloodshot eyes, they couldn't see anything. But that's enough. He was now completely certain that the prototype of the death apartment was taking shape. That's enough. If Ding Zai is just bluffing and this method fails to summon the death apartment, then he will need to expend considerable extra effort in choosing the tomb ghost. Thinking about this, Chu Qing didn't waste any more time. He glanced at the time, placed the yin god of wealth on the counter, and without even taking off his clothes, lay down directly on the wooden bed in the other room, his eyelids slowly closing. Even with the fusion and symbiosis of the blood eyes, however, it didn't make his body much stronger. On the contrary, judging from his lifespan in the mortal and spiritual realms, it's clear that for him, fusing with the blood eyes was actually a burden. However, precisely because of this, having been up and about non-stop since morning, Chu Qing was also exhausted. However, as the lights went out and he closed his eyes just as he was drifting off to sleep, a sharp, clanging sound came from outside the door. Yako, Yako. Save her life. Chu Qing opened her eyes, got up and pushed open the door. Then she saw Fang Ping frantically pounding on the iron gate of the cemetery. However, at this moment, Fang Ping's situation was somewhat miserable. His trousers and body were stained with blood and there were several clearly visible cuts on his neck. Chu Qing frowned slightly. What's wrong? A ghost? A ghost? Holy crap, Yako, you saved my life, I'll kowtow to you. Looking at Fang Ping, who was rambling incoherently, and the extremely thick and dense yin energy surrounding him, it was clear that this guy had encountered a ghost. Chu Qing nodded, not minding at all. Come in. Fang Ping finally followed them into the guardhouse. Chu Qing relit the lamp. Did you see a ghost? After entering, Fang Ping seemed to have recovered all at once. The terrifying experience of being between life and death had left him as if he hadn't yet come to his senses. Was that paper figure used? Fang Ping nodded again, then looked at his friend. Isn't Chu Qing a little too calm? However, thinking back to what had just happened, Fang Ping still felt a chill run down his spine. Tell me about it. After yawning and pouring himself a glass of water, Chu Qing finally felt more at ease. Then Fang Ping recounted everything that had just happened. Human head lanterns. Chu Qing thought for a moment. In his previous life, Luo City's special geographical location made the frequency and number of ghost outbreaks much higher than in most cities in the Dragon Kingdom. He knows a great deal, and he doesn't know a great deal, big and small. It's impossible for him to know everything. However, according to Fang Ping's description, this thing actually transmits the rules of murder through that light. This method is even more convenient than his blood-red eyes. If it grows up, it likely has considerable potential. Of course, blood eyes killing rules might be more complex than this human head lantern, but in terms of combat power and the strength of its rules, Chu Qing has not yet seen any 9th grade strange being that can contend with blood eye. Therefore, he wasn't worried about anything. So the injuries you sustained were from falling from the sky after the paper doll took effect. Fang Ping nodded. Kingsley, you have no idea how scared I was on my way here from my house. Those damn taxi drivers saw me several times and almost ran me over without stopping. Thankfully, a kind person showed up. Otherwise, oh dear, we two brothers would be separated by death. Ignoring Fang Ping's snotty nose and tears, Chu Qing nodded. All right, you should go to sleep now. Sleep here, tomorrow during the day I'll go with you to your place to take a look. Based on my deduction, that thing shouldn't be able to kill indefinitely. After its defeat here tonight, it'll probably come looking for you again tomorrow. Be prepared. Upon hearing this, Fang Ping turned pale, but Chu Qing had already returned to the house. The night passed quickly. Chu Qing slept soundly, while Fang Ping's dark circles under his eyes clearly indicated that he hadn't had a very comfortable night. However, just as Chu Qing woke up and got up, the knocking on the large iron gate outside started again. Chu Qing opened the door and sure enough, it was none other than Ryuxu. Chu Qing's gaze held a hint of amusement. The reason is simple. Yesterday, when this woman led him to the Lin family villa, she was driving a BMW 530 worth several $100,000. However, today, this ex-girlfriend, whose parents-in-law and husband all died, was driving her late husband's Ferrari SF90. Meeting Chu Qing's teasing gaze. The latter forced a smile. I brought breakfast, you haven't eaten yet, have you? Come in. Upon arriving at the guardhouse and seeing Fang Ping and Ryuxu was slightly taken aback but quickly recovered, let's eat. Crab roe buns, shrimp dumplings, and spicy soup. This woman had put a lot of thought into it, bringing over a variety of breakfast options. Each of the three was preoccupied with their own thoughts and none of them spoke. However, to Chu Qing's surprise, the sound of an engine came from outside the door again at that moment. Is Beishan Cemetery always this busy? What surprised him even more was that the locked door suddenly made a rattling sound, clearly indicating that it had been opened. Chu Qing's brows furrowed slowly, then she went to the window of the guardhouse and looked outside. A woman in her 40s walked in, glancing back at the yellow Ferrari as she went, looking somewhat puzzled. After Chu Qing and the other two walked out the door, the woman screamed instinctively as if she had seen a ghost. You're not dead. A crimson glint appeared deep within Chu Qing's eyes, should he die. These three words alone contain a profound meaning that is worth pondering. These early morning guests are quite interesting. Has to be said that since joining the company yesterday, Chu Qing has been able to sense that the situation at Beishan Cemetery is quite peculiar and filled with eeriness. It's not just because of the existence of the faceless demon, it's about the onboarding process. From the lingering yin energy, it's not difficult to observe the faceless ghost Chu Qing later on. The presence of lingering yin energy in the cemetery before he took the job suggested that his predecessor hadn't been dead for long. It might even take about a day. In just one day, before the previous employee's death has even been resolved, he's already started working. Why are you in such a hurry? Besides, didn't the gravedigger who died before have any family members? There were quite a few doubts, but Chu Qing was too lazy to think about them. Now it seems that the reason has emerged. However, before Chu Qing could react, the woman frowned and quickly realized what was going on. Since you're not dead, what were you doing last night? Why didn't you clock in last night? Why didn't you clock in for patrol this morning? Such slack on your first day. You're Chu Qing, right? From now on, you're fired. The woman looked to be around 40 years old with very high cheekbones, very thin lips, and a sharp and sarcastic expression. And what he says is even more interesting. Expelling a tomb keeper from his tomb. This was one of the most imaginative jokes Chu Qing had ever heard. Before Chu Qing could speak, Ryuxu stepped forward and looked at the woman. Who are you? The woman glanced at Ryuxu, Huang Hong, the manager of the Beishan office. Ryuxu's lips curled up, revealing a cold smile. In that case, effective immediately, you are fired. What gives you the right to fire me? A woman in her 40s named Huang Hong stepped forward. Judging from her appearance, if it weren't for the presence of Chu Qing and Fang Ping, she seemed ready to take action. Ryuxu, however, didn't care at all. She took out 2 pieces of paper from her Hermes bag and first looked at Chu Qing, saying, "They originally wanted to give you a surprise." Then he looked at Huang Hong. "This morning, I called Mr. Wang Tao, the general manager of your Beishan office. He has now leased part of the operating rights of Beishan Cemetery and the Beimangshan scenic area to me and this Mr. Chu Qing for 20 years at a price of 10 million yuan. Therefore, we both have full authority over personnel appointments and dismissals at the Beishan office. My name is Ryuxu. Do you have any other questions?" Upon hearing this, Huang Hong's face paled slightly, but after seeing the black and white words on the paper as well as the signature and fingerprint, she was completely stunned and couldn't react at all. So fast. Even Chu Qing had this question so fast. Ryuxu handled this in just one night. Besides, the 3 members of the Lin family are still barely cold in their graves. However, it is clear that he underestimated his ex-girlfriend's decisiveness. That's right. Now at the Lin family villa, after the Lin family was wiped out, not to mention the shareholders of Senmu Group, The Lin family's business friends and all sorts of distant relatives have come. As the heir to the Lin family's estate with a special status, she should be the target of public criticism. Because she was the target of everyone's criticism, and Ryuxu, who witnessed everything yesterday, understood this very well. Even if she had some tricks up her sleeve, it would be difficult for her to completely seize this wealth. Besides some overt methods, there were also some covert ones. And the only person who could protect her and do all this was Chu Qing. So in that one night, she quickly sorted out the Lin family's available cash flow, contacted the Lin family's connections, and made a call to the general manager Wang in charge of Beishan. The contract was finalized privately within a few hours. This was a gift she gave to Chu Qing and also a talisman for her to save her life. This woman's intelligence and decisiveness are indeed unmatched by ordinary people. Chu Qing noticed this little scheme but didn't care. So-called official documents and contracts are only somewhat useful in the current period and for the first few months or 6 months after the arrival of the Age of Terror. Later, with social order and chaos, fists and power became the only contract. However, he ignored these trivial matters at the moment and instead looked at Huang Hong in front of him. Sure enough, this Beishan cemetery contained other secrets that he was unaware of. The key to the mystery lies with this woman named Huang Hong. He slowly walked forward and Huang Hong subconsciously took a few steps back. Her expression was not good, whether it was because she had been fired or for some other reason, it was unclear. In fact, a hint of sinister murderous intent occasionally flashed in her eyes. She looked at this guy who was so handsome he was almost inhuman. Finally, Chu Qing stopped 5 meters in front of her. Then finally he spoke. This very first sentence shocked Huang Hong. "You smell strongly of death." Huang Hongqiang chuckled. "What are you saying?" "Too much dampness in your body, then I'll go get cupping done." After saying that, the woman turned around and walked towards the door without looking back, then drove away in a flash. Chu Qing calmly watched the woman drive away, while Fang Ping, who was standing to the side, finally couldn't help but speak up. "Brother Qing, isn't this guy acting a bit strange?" Chu Qing hummed in agreement, seemingly lost in thought. Fang Ping, on the other hand, suddenly had a flash of inspiration. What happened last night had made him realize that there were other things in this world. These things can control the life, death, and fate of others at any time. And his good brother is definitely a master in this field. A paper figure folded casually could save him from dire straits. Clearly, he's not an ordinary person. At this moment, Fang Ping had already imagined that, faced with this obviously strange woman, the two of them, along with Ryuxu, would form a paranormal investigation team like those in novels or anime. An inexplicable sense of legendary mission washed over Fang Ping, instantly dispelling his previous drowsiness and energizing him. "Brother Qing, when do we set off?" Chu Qing gave Fang Ping a strange look. He couldn't understand where this guy's emotions came from. Departure? Departure from what place? Fang Ping pointed to the yellow exhaust fumes as the car sped away. "Of course we're going to investigate that woman. She's been acting suspiciously. She's definitely up to no good." Chu Qing looked at this guy with an even stranger expression. "Fang Ping, haven't your teachers taught you a single principle since you were little?" Fang Ping blinked. "What's the logic behind that? If you encounter danger or bad people, of course you should call the police and find Inspector Haduncle." Fang Ping was stunned. He hadn't expected this at all. However, Chu Qing ignored him and right in front of him took out her phone and made a call. "Hello, I want to call the police." One of the survival rules of the terrifying era. Never be careless when you don't know anything about strange information. Because you never know, perhaps one of those strange, rule-based abilities will just happen to be the perfect counter to you. Countless self-proclaimed invincible demon slayers have fallen by the wayside. Even with the blood-eyed demon, which gives him a significant advantage, Chu Qing never lets his guard down, especially when facing a completely unknown ghost. Reporting to the police is a very good way to gather intelligence. Los Angeles Inspectorate Headquarters, Criminal Division. The young man who received the call looked worried. "Another report. How many cases have there been in the last 2 weeks? What are you all standing there for? Quickly tell me what the problem is." The captain, standing to the side, spoke up displeased. At the cemetery in Beishan, someone reported that someone had died there before, but it wasn't reported. The local office didn't handle it, and they hired a new security guard that same day. That's the guard who just called. Why transfer such a vague matter to our criminal investigation department? Don't you know how busy we are lately? Who knows? As the two were talking, 2 figures walked in from outside the door. The captain looked at the 2 of them. "Zio Liu, Zio Tan, have you found any useful clues?" Most people focused on the female inspector whose name tag read Liu Lion. The reason is simple. Beneath that rather unsuitable uniform lies a torrent of energy. However, that face was like that of a doll that hadn't fully grown up yet. Forcibly putting on a cold expression didn't make it seem unapproachable. On the contrary, it was quite cute. Reporting to the captain, we went to the Shihao Villa complex today. Captain Wang frowned. What are we going there for? A headless corpse from the old town, how could it possibly appear in the villa area? The two women exchanged a glance, then lowered their heads. It was Inspector Liu Lion who spoke first. Captain Wang, it's like this. In the old city area, no new victims were found today, and there has been no progress in the remaining visits to family members and evidence collection. Besides, my colleagues and seniors have already finished, so I don't think will be needed. So I heard something last night that seemed a bit strange, so I went to check it out today since I had nothing else to do. What is it? It's like this. Last night at the Second People's Hospital, the entire Lin family of the Senmu group died. Looking at the mysterious Liu Lion, Captain Wang sighed. He was somewhat helpless. This young lady had an impressive background, yet she insisted on joining the most dangerous criminal investigation department, always causing trouble with some absurd things. He really didn't know what the chief was thinking. How could he not know that the entire Lin family of 3 had died? Lin Yuancheng was a prominent figure in Luocheng. But what's there to say about that case? Everyone saw that Lin Yuancheng was experiencing mental problems. The surveillance cameras were there at the time, and no one went in or out. Moreover, the way he died was something no outsider could have done. His wife suffered an acute cerebral hemorrhage, needless to say. The only one with some issues is the eldest son of the Lin family. However, many nurses and doctors witnessed him jumping off the building, and it was clearly a suicide. What does this kind of case have to do with their criminal investigation department? However, considering this young lady's background and connections, Captain Wang could only nod and ask, "Did you find anything?" "There really is," Liu Lion said mysteriously. "I discovered that after the deaths of the entire Lin family of 3, the biggest beneficiary was Lin Hengshen's fiancée, a woman named Ryuxu. And according to my investigation, they had only been married for less than half a month. Less than half a month later, the entire Lin family of 3 died, and their inheritance all fell into her hands, leaving her an outsider. It's safe to say that Ryuxu is the prime suspect with the strongest motive." "Then what?" Captain Wang shrugged. "Where's the evidence?" "Everyone has already proven it was suicide." Liu Lion scratched her head. "We're still looking, and I discovered something else this time. This morning, the Lin family villa was quite lively, but Ryuxu wasn't there. I checked the traffic surveillance footage and found out that she seemed to have gone to see her ex-boyfriend. Most importantly, when the Lin family of 3 died yesterday, her ex-boyfriend Chu Qing was also at the second hospital." Clearly, including Captain Wang, no one cared about Liu Lion's so-called discovery. The reason is simple. Liu Lion's speculations were indeed correct. However, the problem was that the deaths of the Lin family of 3 were so well documented that the evidence was simply too conclusive. Inspectors cannot judge cases based on feelings. Even if it sounds like Ryuxu had a strong motive, the point remains, judgments must be based on evidence. However, at that moment the inspector standing nearby suddenly said, "Wait, little durian, what did you just say was Ryuxu's ex-boyfriend's name?" "Chu Qing seems to have inexplicably gone to Beishan Cemetery to work as a security guard or gatekeeper. My gut feeling is that Chu Qing definitely has something going on with Ryuxu." Before Liu Lion could finish speaking, the inspector interrupted. "Speaking of which, the call I just made to the police was from that Chu Qing guy." Upon hearing this, Liu Lion immediately stood up. Upon seeing this reaction, Captain Wang immediately made a decision. "All right, in that case, Liu Lion, you don't need to help with the headless corpse case in the old city for now. Take Tan Yu to the Beishan Cemetery and ask around." "Okay." Even Chu Qing had to admit it. "The female inspector in front of me is quite distinctive. Of course, this characteristic isn't just about her physique but also her face. A face that somewhat resembles someone from my memory. You're Chu Qing? Did you file the report? Tell me the specifics." "Okay, we've written it down. Do you have anything to add?" The male inspector named Tan Yu continued to ask. Chu Qing shook her head. At that moment, Liu Lion finally couldn't help but ask. I wanted to ask, what are your thoughts on the deaths of Lin Hengshen and his son?" Chu Qing's heart stirred and he put on a rather sentimental expression. "I was at the second hospital yesterday and what I saw there made me quite emotional. It turns out that wealthy people aren't truly happy either. The most important thing in life is to be happy." Clearly, his appearance did not dispel the female inspector's suspicions, and she continued to look at him with a scrutinizing gaze. Although she had to admit that faced with such a man's face, she simply couldn't regard him as a suspect. Chu Qing, however, looked at her with a smile. Inspector Liu, who is Liu Ci to you? Upon hearing this, Liu Lion was slightly taken aback. It's my brother. You know my brother? That can't be right. He's studying for his PhD in Beijing. I checked your records and you've been in Los Angeles the whole time. At this point, Liu Lion quickly stopped talking, blinked, and looked at Chu Qing nervously. Chu Qing didn't mind and smiled, saying, that Huang Hong is really a bit dangerous. I suggest you investigate first to see if anyone around her has gone missing or disappeared back to their hometown. Don't summon her casually, don't act alone rashly. This is my WeChat ID. Feel free to contact me anytime if you need my assistance. The two were taken aback and gave Chu Qing a strange look. However, they still added Chu Qing on WeChat. According to Chu Qing's description, this matter was indeed unusual, and they really needed to investigate the whereabouts of the previous security guard in the area around Huang Hong. The gate closed, and the two quickly drove away. Chu Qing also fell into deep thought. Liu Ci, the King Qin Guang from the previous life. King Qin Guang is ranked first among the legendary 10 Kings of Hell, and while Liu Ci's strength may not be the best, he was definitely among the top-ranking underworld officials on Earth at that time. More importantly, he was the head of the Bureau of Extraordinary Events, the official ghost-controlling organization of the Dragon Kingdom at that time, amidst the collapse of the established order. In that terrifying era of broken order, it was arguably the last vestige of official prestige and public support. He hadn't expected that the younger sister of King Qin Guang from his previous life was actually in Luochang. However, in his previous life, he had heard that King Qin Guang and the Bureau of Extraordinary Affairs had repeatedly tried to eliminate the strange forces entrenched in Luo City, led by the blood-eyed Dragon Lord. Could this be related to this woman? Interesting. As for Liu Lion's slight suspicion of him, he didn't care at all. Before he could think much about it, Fang Ping returned shortly after he left, this time carrying a large bag of things. Seeing Fang Ping's strained appearance, Chu Qing nodded, "You're back." Fang Ping wiped the sweat from his brow. "Brother Qing, what do you need so much of this for?" At this moment, the contents of Fang Ping's package were revealed, besides the large amount of white paper used for origami figures. There were also pieces of wood, even marble slabs, and a whole host of other random things like cinnabar. Mind your own business, keep folding your paper figures. Fang Ping had no choice but to ask anyway, "Brother Qing, when are we going to cause trouble for that lantern?" Human head lantern. The original plan was for Chu Qing to scout out the location before going to buy these things with Fang Ping during the day. However, things don't always go according to plan, and Huang Hong's police report left him with little time. The sooner we finish these things, the more confident we'll feel. It's not too late to go tonight. Besides, you didn't sleep well last night. If you really can't sleep, go get some more sleep later. Become. Ignoring Fang Ping, Chu Qing looked at the items and nodded in satisfaction. These things have a very simple purpose. It is a tool used by the Tomb Keeper to make the tomb, and also a material to draw the Eyrie to the tomb he guards. At the same time, it is also the job change tool needed to become a 9th rank Yin official, the Gravekeeper. He had to prepare in advance to ensure that he would be the first 9th rank Ghost Keeper to become the Gravekeeper after midnight tomorrow. If he remembers correctly, becoming the first person to hold a corresponding underworld position would bring considerable benefits. In my previous life, I didn't seize this opportunity, but in this life, he naturally cannot let him go. September 1st, 6:42 a.m. There are 29 hours and 18 minutes left until the Age of Terror officially begins. Night fell completely and the sky was pitch black. Normally, it shouldn't get dark this early at this time. However, this year, the nights seem to arrive much earlier than usual in September. Liu Lion sighed and glanced at her partner driving beside her. "Old Tan, why is solving a case so difficult? Why is identifying a murderer so hard?" Tan Yu said, "Regardless, a case requires evidence, although I feel her problems are also significant." "You also think Chu Qing is acting strangely, right? He kept asking about Huang Hong on WeChat today. He's really paying attention." Tan Yu looked at the excited Miss Liu and gave her an awkward yet polite smile. The suspect I'm talking about is Huang Hong. Didn't we get a lead today? Huang Hong's husband, Zhao Chuan, said he was going back to his hometown and he's been gone for 3 days now, but no one there has been any trace of him. Liang Dazhu, the security guard who used to be at Beishan Cemetery, has also disappeared. This Huang Hong is really suspicious. I've already applied for an investigation warrant from Captain Wang. Liu Lion deflated. You also believe that the deaths of the Lin family of 3 have nothing to do with outsiders, right? Tan Yu scratched his head and quickly changed the subject. Sister Liu, it's time to leave work. I'll head out now. There have been a lot of cases these past few days, so don't put too much pressure on yourself. Would you like me to take you home? Tanyu knew very well that just the fact that this young lady had been escorted by their director and a top figure from Luo City made her someone he couldn't possibly covet. The most valuable quality in a person is self-awareness. Seeing her partner like this, Liu Lion let out a soft snort. Never mind, let's just stop here. I'll go grab something to eat. By the way, where is this? Tanyu glanced at it. Isn't Huang Hong's family from this area in the old town? Sister Liu, never mind, I'll drive you to the city center. It's not very safe around here right now. No need, don't forget I brought this with me. Liu Lion patted the slender gun stock that was completely asymmetrical to the shape of the gun above. Tanyu thought for a moment, then nodded. This person is no mere pretty face. In numerous internal assessments, she consistently ranked first in target practice. Okay, we were full and satisfied. An hour later, Liu Lion walked out of the small restaurant in the alley. The old town is the old town because of its other public facilities. Even the streetlights appeared extremely dim. It was only around 8 o'clock, and there were hardly any people on the main road. Liu Lion walked along the roadside, the buzzing of mosquitoes, flies, and moths inexplicably irritating her. She muttered to herself, "We need to give Uncle Du some feedback. The renovation of this old town needs to be put on the agenda. We haven't even seen a taxi all day, it's really." But soon her eyes lit up. A taxi was parked in front of a gate. She quickly went up and knocked on the driver's window. The car window rolled down, revealing the face of a middle-aged man whose pale complexion even seemed to glow in the dim light. Even when faced with a stunningly beautiful woman, the driver remained completely unmoved, staring at her with eyes as expressionless as a dead fish. "Is the master leaving?" The man didn't speak but nodded. Liu Lion was overjoyed and was about to get into the car when a not-so-shrill scream rang out in the distance. As a people's inspector, Liu Lion suddenly raised her head and looked behind her. This is an old-style residential area. You can tell from the dilapidated storefront and the rusty iron gate. Without a second thought, Liu Lion ran straight into the residential complex. However, she quickly caught a glimpse of the complex's name out of the corner of her eye, Jinshin Residential Area. However, Liu Lion, who was leaving, did not see that the pale-faced taxi driver's dead fish-like eyes were slowly moving on their own. Then, the taxi, which looked exactly like a regular taxi, slowly started moving, and after traveling 10 meters, it vanished without a trace. It was as if it had never existed. Less than 2 minutes later, a black Audi slowly pulled up in front of the residential complex. A figure rolled down the car window, glanced at the gate of Jinshin Residential Area, and a glint of red appeared in their eyes. Such a dense aura of yin energy, this is the place, you wait here for now. Excitement thrilling, at this moment Liu Lion had only one thought, the reason is simple. The opportunity she had been longing for to solve the case was now right in front of her, and it's a major case that happened recently, because that scream came from a man. At this moment, the man was unable to utter a sound. Something seemed to be strangling his neck, and half of his head was already buried in that crimson mass, while that crimson thing was in the air not far away. Liu Lion didn't rush to observe. Instead, she hid in the corner and took out 2 items. Just as the rest of his colleagues in the Criminal Investigation Bureau knew, Liu Lion is definitely not just a pretty face. Even at this point, she did not act rashly. Instead, she first sent a message to Captain Wang and Tan Yu on WeChat, calling for backup, before finally releasing the safety and loading the pistol. At that time, 10 meters below in the air, there wasn't a single person around except for that bright red thing. At least she didn't see it. So what exactly is that bright red thing? Drones? But can drones really do that? And who is controlling this thing to kill people, and how did they do it? Liu Lion didn't know. All she knew was that if she didn't act soon, that person would be dead for sure. Therefore, even at the risk of alerting the enemy, she had no choice but to take action. "Hey, you guys, come out, put him down, or I'll shoot. Otherwise, once I shoot this thing down, I'll be able to track you down too." Liu Lion's sharp rebuke echoed throughout the nearly deserted neighborhood. However, silence reigned. This red light even severed all senses in the vicinity. Even those households with lights on seemed not to have heard anything. Liu Lion had no time to think about what was happening. She aimed the hole in her hand at the red light that was slowly flying less than 10 meters in the air. The near-total darkness of the night did nothing to affect her incredibly steady hands as she held the gun. Bang! A burst of flame shot from the muzzle. The fireworks in the darkness seemed to pierce through that red light. The trajectory of that red streak seemed to have been affected. Thump! That shot really worked. The man who had been lifted off with his neck strangled fell from the sky. However, just as Liu Lion was about to help the figure falling from the sky, to her surprise, the thing floated slowly and instead of falling, it came to the top of her head. The moment she subconsciously looked up, she finally saw clearly what it was in the darkness. It was a big red lantern. The light in this darkness was extremely weak. However, being bathed in this red light brought an indescribable sense of comfort. That's the refreshing feeling of being washed with a basin of cool water on a sweltering summer day. That's the ultimate relaxation of soaking in a hot spring in the dead of winter. That was the nicotine aroma of a cigarette after a long night. The feeling of comfort made Liu Lion subconsciously lower the gun in her hand. It felt like I was flying, etc. It flew up. Liu Lion suddenly snapped out of her daze, recovering from the intense sensation she had just experienced. But unbeknownst to her, her body had indeed taken flight. It was as if I was being pulled by something, a pull that was not painful but rather brought with it the same feeling of pleasure as before. She looked up, and the enormous red lantern was already above her, like a hat about to be put down. However, suddenly Liu Lion's pupils contracted sharply. The next moment as she looked up, she finally saw clearly that within the gap beneath the large red lantern inside the red lantern, a human head, a human face was smiling eerily at her. She covered her mouth, struggling frantically but to no avail. Even the only pistol that could give him a sense of security had just fallen to the ground. I'm doomed. She didn't know what it was. All she knew was that she was going to die. She didn't want to die. Her large eyes were brimming with tears of fear. She's only in her early 20s, she hasn't experienced love yet, and there are so many things she hasn't done. But the body that slowly rose into the air, that indescribable coldness. And the lantern base getting closer and closer to her, it constantly reminded her that she was about to become one of the countless headless corpses that had been discovered before. However, as the lantern drew closer, all the resentment and bitterness gradually subsided for Liu Lion. Regardless, she died saving someone. She has at least fulfilled her original aspiration. Thinking of this, Liu Lion even curled the corners of her mouth into a smile welcoming death. However, just then, a crisp sound of footsteps slowly approached from not far away. This neighborhood is so dilapidated, there are hardly any streetlights left. The faint sound of footsteps jolted Liu Lion, who had already seen her grandmother, back to reality. She opened her mouth. It's unclear whether it was trying to call for help or simply wanted the unexpected figure to leave quickly. However, in her last moments of consciousness, as she looked at that figure approaching, Liu Lion was slightly taken aback. That figure held a pitch-black umbrella in its hand. Under the bright moon and sparse stars of the night sky, it appeared so abrupt and strange. His steps were extremely steady. Completely oblivious to the strange phenomenon above her, in Liu Lion's increasingly fading consciousness, the figure appeared at her feet. Then the black umbrella, along with the figure's head, slowly tilted back. He finally looked at her, at the blood-red lantern in the air. Liu Lion nearly fainted, but she mustered her strength and looked at that figure one last time. But in the next instant, Liu Lion felt as if she had been electrocuted. In that darkness, the face hidden beneath the black umbrella remained indistinct, shrouded in night. She still couldn't see the person's face, but in that darkness, which was even deeper than the night itself, she saw a pair of blood-red eyes. It was even more profound and sinister than the blood-red lanterns in the sky. How to snatch away prey that has already fallen under the rules of murder? It's very simple. Just let the prey become immersed in your killing rules before they are completely dead. That's exactly what Chu Qing did. Almost the instant Liu Lion saw those blood-red eyes, the restraints imposed on her by the lanterns in the sky seemed to vanish instantly. Liu Lion, who had been reduced to a bizarre battlefield, could no longer endure the relentless torment and fainted the moment she fell from the sky. In the darkness, the crimson hue on the ground and in the sky complement each other. Chu Qing caught Liu Lion with both hands and tossed her aside as if she were trash, then looked up again. Blood eyes gave him feedback immediately. Human head lantern rank, 9th grade category, ghostly specters lifespan in the Underworld, 7 months and 16 days. Decapitation rule. If you are directly beneath the lantern of human heads, you will enter a dragging state. Once the head is dragged into the lantern, the murder rule is completed. Darkness under the lamp ability. The flickering candlelight can alter the perception of living beings. Furthermore, when the candlelight is lit, it can obscure the vision of beings outside the candlelight and block all attacks except those using supernatural methods. Spiritual form state, normally unobservable and can pass through physical obstacles. Each passage consumes a certain amount of lifespan. Promotion requirements, unknown. Note, this piece of junk has pretty good potential, but unfortunately it's still a bit lacking compared to me. Being invincible is truly lonely. Chu Qing calmly gazed at the object. At this very moment he stood beneath the lantern shaped like a human head. The escape of two prey in succession seemed to suddenly ignite the usually calm and collected red lantern. The flickering red light painted this world a deep crimson hue. This also gave Chu Qing a sense of ethereal lightness. This must be a deception of perception. What a terrifying ability. It's fair to say that this human-headed lantern is capable of annihilating an entire city. If this thing is upgraded in rank and not eliminated, countless ordinary people in Luo City will likely suffer a terrible fate. No wonder even someone as proud as Blood Eyes said that this human head lantern was only slightly inferior to his own. Apart from the fact that the killing rules of this thing seemed rather weak, its ability to blindly point out flaws was indeed powerful. However, the cold feedback from his eyes did not stop Chu Qing's thoughts in the slightest. Instead, it made him slowly speak, saying softly, "It's indeed a bit dark where I live at night and we need something to light it up. Would you like to come over?" Phew. A sudden gust of wind seemed to sweep through the entire Jinshan residential area as a result. The wind howled, causing Chu Qing's jet-black trench coat to flutter loudly. The lantern with human heads provided the answer. The enormous lantern suddenly sank, as if something had been tied directly around his neck. However, the lantern's attempt to drag it into the air suddenly froze in place. This was because, within those lanterns filled with human heads, a terrifyingly grotesque face turned its gaze toward Chu Qing. Their blood-red pupils met, the rope around his neck was untied. The enormous lantern slowly fell to the ground. Even though both are ninth-rank supernatural beings, the human-headed lantern still had to submit to the blood-eyed dragon lord under the impact of the rules. An eye for an eye. The instant Chu Qing's bloodshot eyes met Chu Qing's, the killing rule of the human head lantern was perfectly deflected by Chu Qing. So previously it was the lantern with the human head that was dragging Chu Qing, but now it's Chu Qing who's dragging the lantern with the human head. If he wanted to, he could simply reverse the heavenly stems and stick his head into the lantern of human heads. It wouldn't be him who died, but the lantern of human heads. It was precisely because it realized this situation that the lantern with the human head stopped resisting. He slowly lifted it up. He smiled as he looked at the lanterns adorned with human heads whose red glow had dimmed considerably. At the same time, his curiosity grew even stronger. Just how high is the rule weight of Blood Eye? Weight is the power of bizarre rule-based abilities. Often, especially many years after the arrival of the Age of Terror, as the level of bizarre advancement increases, the power of the rules makes it easy for situations of rule-based conflict to arise. The bizarre clash of rules between the two sides necessitates determining the outcome of this clash by weighing the relative weight of each side's rules. In later terrifying eras, many demon slayers assessed the potential of the supernatural primarily in three aspects. First, is it easy to activate the rules and how powerful are the abilities? The second point is the weighting of rule-based capabilities. The third area is one that Chu Qing has not yet ventured into, the mysterious advancement. These three factors are the most important criteria for judging something eerie. Unfortunately, perhaps due to its low grade, the only thing Blood Eye couldn't detect was the weight and power of the ability's rules. Once the Book of Life and Death appears, Chu Qing can then take a good look at the true weight of the Blood Eye. And now. He walked slowly forward, picked up the blood-red lantern, and by the light of the blood-red lantern, Chu Qing was slightly taken aback and looked at the figure beside him. It wasn't Liu Lion, but the man Liu Lion saved at the very beginning. However, even Chu Qing didn't expect that this person was actually an acquaintance. That's right. Since his rebirth, he has almost completely forgotten many of the people from his past. But he had seen the person in front of him yesterday morning, and the person's attitude had left a deep impression on him. Su Wei. After he arrived at Beishan Cemetery, he met the guy at the reception desk. What is he doing here? Chu Qing's blood-red eyes narrowed slightly. At the same time, Blood Eyes gave feedback. Zu Y grade, none lifespan, 1 month near-death coma state, unable to move, unable to think. Note, a weak human male, tainted by corpse energy and yin energy, with numerous sharp weapon wounds all over his body, would hardly survive long even without encountering the human head lantern. Human, with your intelligence, I bet you've already guessed what it is, haven't you? As a token of my gratitude for this contribution, how about giving it to me as a snack? Chu Qing's gaze remained unwavering as he picked up the lantern with the human head and raised the black umbrella once more. As he walked, he covered his eyes and said, "Stop arguing, eating too much of this is bad for your health and will affect your development, okay? Besides, how are you going to eat? You want me to pry open his eyelids? That woman? No, that won't do, I'll need her later." All right, enough with the nonsense. In the pitch-black night, the time had slowly ticked towards 9 o'clock. In the empty and dark neighborhood, a figure holding a black umbrella and carrying a blood-red lantern talking to himself was a scene that would terrify anyone. However, it was precisely this scene that caused a figure to open their eyes in a daze. Liu Lion stared at the red light and the tall figure beneath the trench coat. She wanted to reach out, but the earlier dragging had left her weak, and the place where she had fallen was throbbing with excruciating pain. Wait. The figure stopped but did not turn around. What is that? The blood-red lantern at this moment was as quiet as a kitten hanging in the figure's hand, as if everything that had just happened was an illusion. The voice rang out again. It's just a hungry little thing. Sorry, I scared you. Liu Lion stared blankly at the thing, then at the figure's back, a wave of weakness washing over her. The double images before her eyes made it impossible for her to discern the details of the figure. Finally, she could only ask, "Then, who are you?" The figure fell silent and slowly walked away. The darkness under the lamp ability means that those outside the light of the lantern cannot see anything within it. As the figure receded into the distance, completely hidden by the light of the headlamps and slowly disappearing into the darkness, Liu Lion's conscious efforts finally crumbled, and she fainted once more. However, in the instant before losing consciousness, a voice came from the dark mist, King Chujiang. 10 minutes later, the sound of sirens pierced the darkness. The sound echoed at the entrance of Jinshan residential area. A group of heavily armed figures quickly approached and soon spotted Liu Lion and Su Wei lying on the ground. The fat bureau chief who was running at the front almost lost his soul when he saw this scene. Fortunately, when he rushed over, he found that the person was still breathing, and he finally breathed a sigh of relief. As for Su Wei standing to the side, he didn't even glance at him. Zio Liu, are you all right? Liu Lion slowly opened her eyes, and only after seeing the familiar inspector's hat did she finally breathe a sigh of relief. She forced herself to utter the 3 words most deeply etched in her memory. King Chujiang, go find him quickly. The director, along with Captain Wang and the others who followed him, exchanged bewildered glances. What, King Chujiang, a deity in the underworld? One of the legendary Yama who commands countless vengeful ghosts, but how could such a thing exist? Did this girl just have a brush with death and then hallucinate? Thinking of this, the director quickly shouted, "Ambulance, quick." Fang Ping was unaware of the situation at the inspectorate. At this moment, just like in Ryuxu when she escorted Yin Keishin to the second hospital, he was forcibly controlling his eyes from looking behind him, but he was still subconsciously looking at the rearview mirror. Looking at Chu Qing, who was wearing a black trench coat, there was a red lantern about the size of a millstone placed next to her. This thing dragged me outside last night and almost killed me, and right now this thing is in my back seat. It's impossible not to feel weak in the knees. Fang Ping's little tricks couldn't be hidden from Chu Qing. However, Chu Qing didn't care about these trivial matters at this moment. All his thoughts were focused on what had just happened. Today, he asked in Ryuxu to do something, investigate Huang Hong's background. Combined with the information revealed by Qin Guangwang's sister, he also learned about Huang Hong. Huang Hong's home is in the Old Town area near Jinshan community. It's quite obvious that Huang Hong was behind Su Wei's condition. The stench of death emanating from him was almost identical to that of Huang Hong. So this woman turned her missing husband into a zombie. At first glance, this seems to be the most likely explanation. But thinking of this, Chu Qing frowned slightly. That doesn't make sense. At this stage, it's impossible for something as bizarre as zombies to appear. This thing is so powerful that even a 7th or 8th rank ghost tamer would have a headache just looking at it, let alone a 9th rank ghost tamer or a ghost master. Therefore, if there really were a zombie, Su Wei wouldn't have been able to escape. He would definitely be dead. More importantly, if it were truly a zombie, why would it listen to Huang Hong, based solely on the assumption that he was very likely her husband before his death? But the problem is, she doesn't even know if she killed him, so how could he become a zombie and obey her? If Huang Hong hadn't been reborn and hadn't become a 7th rank Yin official, a corpse driver, before the terrifying era descended, Chu Qing would have gladly committed suicide. That's clearly unlikely. Could it be? Chu Qing raised an eyebrow slightly, her eyes lighting up. At this stage, it's impossible for a real zombie to appear. Otherwise, Lo's angels probably wouldn't even last 6 months before being completely destroyed. Even in the previous life, Lo's angels lasted for 3 full years before being completely wiped out. However, after figuring it out, Chu Qing was no longer in a hurry. If it really is that thing, it needs a large number of corpses to feed on. Huang Hong isn't stupid. She's already dared to attack Su Wei, who's right next to her. Clearly realizing that he had already called the police, he was ready to go all out and force-feed that thing. She estimated that the next period of time wouldn't be very comfortable. However, after midnight tomorrow, the Book of Life and Death will descend. The death game will officially begin, and the Age of Horror will officially return. The number of strange occurrences in the city will increase significantly, and by then, those people probably won't have the time or energy to capture her. So be it. Chu Qing's sparkling eyes closed again. Let her play by herself. Brother Qing, are we going back to the cemetery? Under the cover of night, the Audi that Ryuxu had delivered sped through the darkness. However, atop a dark old building in this old town, a figure crouched, watching the ambulances and police cars speeding past below. Sure enough, those damn inspectors have traced me back to that kid. It's all his fault. Those sinister eyes held an indescribable resentment and malice. The face was none other than Huang Hong, who was also present during the day. But how did that kid survive? Has the strange thing at Beishan's cemetery disappeared? Gaga, Huang Hong quickly turned her head and looked at her shoulder. At this very moment, a peculiar creature was perched on her shoulder. It was a completely black crow. However, its body was a full size larger than that of an ordinary crow, and its eyes were not the black of a typical crow, but rather a ghostly green. It's like a vicious wolf hunting in the night. The crow's sharp claws scratched Huang Hong's shoulder, even drawing a few drops of blood. Huang Hong didn't seem to care at all and instead spoke very gently in a soft voice. Don't worry, baby, let's look again. We're sure we can find some food for you, let's go. After he finished speaking, the crow seemed to understand, spread its wings, and suddenly flew away, while Huang Hong grabbed the crow's ankle. Although she was extremely thin, she looked to weigh around 80 or 90 pounds, yet the crow dragged her through the air without any effort. Let's wait until tomorrow. We'll rest today, and tomorrow night we'll go find that brat and get revenge, okay? I'll gouge out your favorite eyeballs for you to eat first, and we'll share the rest. Gaga. Little did Chu Qing know that his most relied-upon eyes had already been targeted. Under the cover of darkness, carrying a lantern shaped like a human head, Chu Qing slowly walked into the guardhouse of Beishan Cemetery. Just as expected. On the glass of the guardhouse, the line of words written in blood began to writhe rapidly once more. Chu Qing could sense it with absolute clarity. The thing inside had become even more powerful. His summoning method was more direct than Ding Zai's back then, using his own blood, which was inherently heavy with yin energy, as a paint, combined with the yin energy of the faceless ghost to nourish it. It seems to be working quite well. The blood-red characters kept writhing, constantly trying to condense, and finally slowly turned into a blood-red color. Then, as if absorbed by the glass door again, they disappeared without a trace. This scene left Fang Ping completely dumbfounded. Brother Qing, what's this thing again? Chu Qing said calmly. A new weirdness, you'll get used to it. How are you feeling today? Fang Ping really wanted to say that he didn't really feel anything because he hadn't participated in anything at all during this trip. However, the blood-red lantern with the human head was still on the ground, its faint light emanating from it, and the very thing that had almost cost him his life was right there beside it. He pursed his lips. Brother Qing, what exactly happened? What else could it be? As you can see, there are ghosts in this world. But before, the past is the past, the present is the present. Chu Qing reached out his hand, and the black cat, which had been waiting at home, darted into his arms in a flash. Chu Qing then realized something. Oh, right, little one, I said I'd give you something delicious yesterday, but I was too busy during the day and forgot. Having said that, he reached out and snatched the black copper coin from the god of wealth's hand. Unbeknownst to him, a thin sheet of white paper money was lying beneath the black copper coin. A daily allowance of ghost money for the deceased. Upon seeing this, the black cat paused for a moment, then seemed to sense something, opened its mouth wide and swallowed it whole. Chu Qing smiled and stroked the little guy's fur, saying with a smile, I haven't given you a name yet, let me think. I'll call you Xuan Tong from now on. Hope you advance to the next rank soon. It's rare to find someone with this potential and talent. I'm not saying I'll make you reach the level of that Nekomata from the island nation, but I don't keep idle people around me. Meow. Seeing Chu Qing's actions, which appeared to be cat abuse to onlookers, Fang Ping still couldn't help but ask, Brother Qing. All right, enough with the nonsense, let's go hang the lanterns up. Chu Qing carried the lantern with the human head, while Fang Ping, preoccupied with his thoughts, picked up the ladder. The two arrived at the door. Chu Qing hung the lantern with the human head behind the gate, slightly illuminating the darkness at the entrance of Beishan Cemetery. He glanced at the large red lantern and nodded. Stay put with me. If you run away and I catch you again, you won't be so lucky next time. But don't worry, I'm not heartless. You won't be shortchanged in your funeral arrangements. Satisfied, Chu Qing leaped down from the ladder and looked up at what lay before her. Behind the pitch-black gate, a large red lantern shone brightly on the hanging mast. The desolate graves and broken tombstones in the distance made the scene all the more eerie and terrifying. However, Chu Qing, who was holding Xuan Tong, did not rush back to the guardhouse. Instead, they set off towards the top of Beishan Cemetery, even though it was already past midnight. Fang Ping followed behind, and in 10 minutes the two arrived at the highest point of Beishan Cemetery. The two stood there, overlooking the entire city of Los Angels. Chu Qing finally said, "Pingzi, there are already 3.5 strange things in Beishan Cemetery right now, and there will be more in the future. Do you understand what that means?" Fang Ping nodded. He thought for a moment and made up his mind. "Brother Qing, I want to go to the countryside." "The countryside? You think that's how you escape those strange things? That's a bit naive." However, to Chu Qing's surprise, Fang Ping shook his head. "No, I know. I've figured it out these past few days, Brother Qing. I want to stay by my parents' side. I know I can probably live a little longer with you, but I'm their only son. Now it's my turn to protect them." Chu Qing was taken aback. Half a minute later, he nodded. "Okay, don't forget the method I taught you. After midnight tomorrow, fold 10 of them yourself, burn them to ashes, soak them in water, and drink the ashes. I don't need to teach you the rest. If there's any danger, you can call me. I might not be able to make it in time, but I can still collect your body. This is the method for paper craftsmen to change their profession from the underworld." Fang Ping nodded excitedly, surprisingly without asking Chu Qing why she knew so much, because he learned something tonight. But in the end, he still looked at Chu Qing, who was overlooking the darkness of the entire city of Luo, and couldn't help but ask, "Brother Qing, does King Chujiang really exist?" Fang Ping left very early in the morning before dawn. Chu Qing wouldn't stop her from doing anything. He has done enough. He saved him from an early death and even taught Fang Ping the method of advancing in the underworld as a paper craftsman. Its value is unimaginable. Once you become the first person to be promoted to a higher rank in this rank, you will receive a benefit. If used properly, this advantage is enough to rise to prominence in the early stages of this terrifying era, and that is enough. "Open your eyes." Chu Qing's weak body made her smile helplessly. Needless to say, he only had less than 3 months left to live in order to fuse with the Blood Eye. More importantly, in order to summon the eerie prototype of the Death Apartment, he had shed 2 small bowls of blood in the past 2 days. If the Death Apartment doesn't appear soon, he really won't be able to afford it anymore. Even with some nourishing foods, it's impossible to see results in a short time. Fortunately, today is the last day. The light on the phone lit up. The time is written very clearly, 7:12 a.m. September 2nd. Tonight, the true beginning of an era of terror will arrive. After midnight, he could officially become the Gravedigger. Once you become a 9th rank Yin official, although the strengthening of your physique is related to your Yin official rank, it shouldn't be this weak no matter what. Thinking about this, Chu Qing wasn't in a hurry. There are less than 15 hours left until the official start of the terrifying era. For these 15 hours, the priority should be on the safe side. Thinking of this, Chu Qing opened the package and took out his laptop. This is just a very, very worn-out notebook. In his hazy memory, it seemed to be something he bought when he and Enryuxu were dating, when they worked part-time together. Slowly open it and connect it to the power source. Chu Qing thought for a moment, opened her browser, and quickly typed a website domain name on the keyboard, skillfully connecting to a VPN. 10 seconds later, the website slowly refreshed, and a pitch-black image appeared before his eyes. On the otherwise completely black forum, 4 blood-red characters in both Huxia and English were etched, House of Ghost Stories. Chu Qing smiled. These guys are really quick and efficient. The House of Ghost Stories was the largest website for exorcists to communicate on the entire planet Earth in the previous life. Here you can see everyone, from those who have reached the highest rank of king to those who have just barely mastered the strange and have only just begun to become 9th rank novices. Furthermore, it's not just humans here. Some unusual and eerie entities can also log in. That's right, in the beginning, this website was just created by a few people with special interests. Later, as more and more strange events occurred on Earth, many people started discussing the strange occurrences from various places here. After a period of terror had passed and the truth of the world had gradually come to light, this was especially true here. What's even more unbelievable is that later on, this House of Strange Tales turned into a real website full of ghost stories. A website that can become truly bizarre and uncanny, a website that can still be accessed even when the power is off or the internet is down. Here, you can hold auctions, post tasks, and sell information. As you can imagine, that's how it went. Therefore, this place often holds a status similar to an official forum among later generations of demon tamers. Currently, this website has clearly not yet grown to that point. However, suddenly Chu Qing's eyes lit up slightly. Speaking of which, he does remember one thing. After the House of Strange Tales officially became a place of strange tales, the forum point system underwent a change. In the present day and in the early days of the horror era, the forum's points could be directly exchanged for currency. However, after the Ghost Stories house became a real place of bizarre and supernatural tales, this rule no longer applies. To exchange for forum points, you'll need to use yin shu, a type of in-game currency, to redeem them. This is why the House of Ghost Stories has such a huge influence in the future. However, after this House of Strange Tales turned into a real place of bizarre tales, Chu Qing couldn't quite remember whether the points of those previous users were still retained. However, he vaguely remembered that in his previous life, there seemed to be some online demon slayers who made a fortune from this. Thinking of this, Chu Qing immediately took out his phone and called Ryuxu, transfer 1 million to my account. Good. And Ryuxu didn't ask why. 5 minutes later, her phone received a message. Then, without thinking, Chu Qing registered an account and, without hesitation, filled in the 3 characters King Chujiang as the account name. Even in this life, he no longer walks the path of the ferryman under the King of Chujiang's Underworld office. However, in his previous life, this title had accompanied him almost continuously after he became famous, and he still had a deep affection for it. 1 million was all converted into points. 100 million forum points. Even after the House of Strange Tales became a true mystery in the previous life, this 100 million points was equivalent to a full 1 million days of yin lifespan. That is approximately 2,700 to 3,000 years of lifespan. Undoubtedly, this is a huge sum of money. That's why Chu Qing stopped chasing after the initial million. Clearly, after the Age of Terror arrived, all existing money and most currencies became worthless. Can you really exchange money for a day of life in the underworld? Let alone a 10-1 ratio, even if it were 10,000, 100,000, or 1 million, countless wealthy people would still be willing to do it. But no. The meaning and value of the yin shu, a type of burial offering, are not only that of hard currency in many cases, but also that of practical use. This is already a huge sum of money. If he continues to be greedy, the House of Strange Tales will inevitably come looking for trouble. The appearance of this thing had no pattern or warning, making it one of the most mysterious and bizarre occurrences in the previous life. If it's not necessary, it's best not to make enemies with them. After exiting the recharge page, Chu Qing looked at the homepage of this website, specifically at the popular posts. Strange red dancing shoes have appeared in the land where the sun never sets. Those who wear them dance until they die from exhaustion. The ghosts of Native Americans have appeared in the United States, a terrifying curse upon an entire race. The horrors of the Otherworld. Does Silent Hill really exist? The terrifying snow woman in the snowy town. As expected, this House of Ghost Stories has already gained some fame, and over this period of time, the gradual arrival of the terrifying era will bring some people into contact with it. Even if only 1 in 10 survives, they will be convinced of the truth of this world. It's understandable that such searches are becoming more frequent. Thinking about this, Chu Qing added a section about the Dragon Kingdom to the existing posts. He had just clicked the button when a knock came from outside the door. Chu Qing frowned but still stood up, opened the door to the Bashan Cemetery, and welcomed the first visitor of the morning. Unfortunately, since he came to Bashan Cemetery, he hasn't met a single person who genuinely wants to buy a burial plot here. None of those people who came were normal. Clearly, this person almost had their head ripped off by a human lantern last night. The eerie aura emanating from him hadn't yet dissipated, yet he dared to come to this cursed place, Inspector Liu Lion. In Chu Qing's eyes, he was definitely not a normal person. Hello, it's nice to see you again, Mr. Chu. Inspector Liu is here. Where's the one from yesterday? Seeing that Liu Lion had arrived alone, her face still deathly pale, Chu Qing could even clearly see that she was wearing a hospital gown underneath her shirt. It's quite obvious that Liu Lion in front of us is someone who escaped from the hospital. Liu Lion shook her head. Something came up and Tan Yu went to handle it. I'm here today to tell you something. Chu Qing didn't rush to ask and still smiled as she said, let's go inside and talk. Following behind Chu Qing, Liu Lion entered the guardhouse. Looking at the wooden sign and small stone tablet on the ground of the guardhouse, Liu Lion's expression turned somewhat unpleasant. For some reason, she felt a chill in the room, even more so than outside the cemetery. This chilling atmosphere involuntarily reminded her of the life-or-death experience she had gone through the previous night. Until last night, she was a staunch atheist. However, what happened last night completely shattered Liu Lion's worldview. That terrifying lantern with a human head and the figure that appeared when I was on my deathbed. King Chujiang, She muttered to herself, though her other colleagues believed she was hallucinating after the attack. She remembered it clearly. That voice. But just then, a voice rang in her ear. Inspector Liu, you can speak now. Please forgive the lack of tea. Seeing the water glass being offered by the hand, Liu Lion subconsciously said thank you. However, she seemed to suddenly become somewhat dazed. That sound last night. She looked up and saw Chu Qing's incredibly handsome face. With a slight flush on her pale cheeks, Liu Lion snapped out of her daze and quickly said, Here's the thing, last night we investigated and found that Su Wei, who also works at the Beishan office, was attacked, and it's very likely that Huang Hong was behind it. Late last night, my colleagues followed the clues and went to Huang Hong's house. At this point, Liu Lion seemed to have thought of something, her pale face turning even more ashen, and she involuntarily shuddered. In Huang Hong's refrigerator, we found some skin flakes and rotten flesh residue. After DNA analysis, we found that the remaining bits of flesh belonged to 8 people, and the one who had been hiding the longest was the one who had been hiding the longest. It's Huang Hong's lover and child. Chu Qing frowned slightly. Has this woman been affected to this extent? This is what a bizarre and terrifying era is like. Some struggle to survive, some rise against the tide, while others transform from human beings into ghosts or even things more terrifying than the supernatural. The preliminary forensic examination indicates that 8 people died, and none of them had been dead for more than 7 days. Chu Qing nodded. It seems my guess was correct. In that case, did you carry out the arrest? Liu Lion frowned. I was also attacked last night, so I didn't participate in the operation. However, according to my colleagues, despite the entire search and surveillance, they still couldn't find Huang Hong's whereabouts. So the main reason I came here this time is to give you some advice, Mr. Chu, as the person who reported the Huang Hong case, and most importantly, you had a verbal altercation with her before reporting it. Therefore, I have reason to suspect that the perpetrator's next target is very likely you. The man before her showed no panic in his eyes but instead nodded. Thank you for the reminder, Inspector Liu. I will be careful. It's not just about being careful. Mr. Chu, if there's any danger, you must call me immediately. Call the inspectorate. Liu Lion stared intently at Chu Qing, her gaze utterly focused. Don't worry, I'll let you know as soon as anything happens. Be careful too, since you've been attacked, take good care of yourself and rest well. Hearing Chu Qing's assurance, Liu Lion stood up. Then she did something Chu Qing hadn't expected. She bowed deeply. I'm sorry, Mr. Chu. What's wrong? This time Chu Qing was genuinely at a loss. I apologize for suspecting you were the murderer in the Lin family massacre yesterday, Liu Lion shouted loudly. Chu Qing smiled. What, you're not suspicious anymore today? Liu Lion pursed her slightly pale red lips and nodded. Yes, something unexpected happened yesterday that made me realize there are still many things in this world that I don't know. So, Mr. Chu. Don't call me Mr. Chu, just call me Chu Qing. Okay, so Chu Qing, I wanted to ask, when you were at the Second People's Hospital, did you see anything else? Liu Lion looked at Chu Qing expectantly. She didn't say what it was, but Chu Qing shook her head. I didn't see it, and you don't need to apologize. At this point, to Liu Lion's astonishment, the man's face slowly drew closer, their faces now no more than 20 centimeters apart. Chu Qing smiled mischievously. Maybe I really was the one who killed him. Liu Lion opened her mouth, forcing a smile. Chu Qing, are you kidding me? What did you use to kill him? Chu Qing pointed to something next to the counter. Use it. Liu Lion turned her head and was slightly taken aback. It was a small bronze statue of the god of wealth, only about 30 centimeters tall, with a black copper coin in its hand. On top of that black copper coin, there was a sheet of snow-white paper money. Liu Lion chuckled. I didn't expect a handsome guy like you to tell such lame jokes. The 3 members of the Lin family didn't suffer injuries from being struck by heavy objects. All right, I have something to do. I'll head back now. I'll see you off. Compared to when they came in step by step, the 2 people who left walked side by side. As they walked, Liu Lion asked, Chu Qing, do you think ghosts exist in this world? As she finished speaking, a breeze seemed to rise in Beishan Cemetery. Chu Qing nodded. Yes, you're not trying to say you have it here, are you? Tusk, you caught me. There's someone following you, but don't worry, with me here it won't do anything to you. A smile appeared on Liu Lion's pale face. You're so annoying, ha ha ha. Ha ha. However, the smile only lasted for 3 moments before gradually stopping and eventually becoming extremely stiff. She tilted her head back, staring blankly at what used to be the entrance to Beishan Cemetery. At the entrance, a tall mast held a large red lantern, which hung there motionless despite the howling mountain winds. It resembled an upside-down, grotesque, blood-red human head, staring at her with venomous hatred from high above. Liu Lion's face turned even paler at this moment. Even more so, they couldn't help but shiver and their teeth chattered rapidly. Just then, a voice rang in her ears again. Is it pretty?